What if the symbols carved into our history were not decoration, but communication? What if the eye, the crescent, and the star were fragments of a single truth, a sacred equation written into the fabric of the universe itself? For thousands of years, these shapes have appeared in temples, in flags, in visions, in dreams, civilizations that never met, speaking the same language of light and proportion. From Babylon to Byzantium, from the pyramids to modern power, their message has survived, hidden in plain sight. This is the geometry of faith, the mathematics of creation, and the mirror of consciousness itself. You are about to enter a story written not in words, but in light, shadow, and return. What if a star drawn in a single breath is more than a shape? What if its angles carry a grammar older than empires? What if the same figure guiding planets also maps the human heart? You must understand, symbols are technologies of memory. Throughout history, a five-pointed star returns like a tide. Some fear it, some bless it, most misunderstand it. Tonight we look again. Slowly, carefully, we trace the lines until meaning appears, and a quiet thesis emerges. The pentagram is a discipline of balance, spirit and matter held in proportion, reminding us that harmony is not an accident, but a practice renewed in every age. Throughout history, the pentagram moves between temple, page, and sky with deliberate poise. It is geometry, but also oath, number, but also story. What many don't see is how this star gathers multiple worlds into one grammar: mathematics and myth, astronomy and devotion, politics and prayer. The central idea we follow through all 10 parts is simple and exacting. Balance gives power its ethics. A star is stable because its forces are held in tension. So are we. When the 5 points align, body, breath, thought, feeling, and will, order arises from chaos, and chaos becomes a teacher rather than a master. We begin where writing is clay and time is a river. Early pentagrams appear in Sumerian contexts, 4th millennium BCE, where signs compress cosmos into marks. Some scholars connect the figure to directions and realms, a way to speak of world order with wedges of light. In later Mesopotamian usage, the star's association with Ishtar links love, war, and the morning star's piercing return, a union of beauty and force. Long before controversy, the star simply works, a compact compass, a map of centers and edges, a sign that the world coheres. The earliest echoes set a cadence we will keep: proportion as prayer, orientation as protection. Across the Aegean, number becomes music you can see. Pythagoreans adopt the pentagram as a seal of recognition, a living emblem of health, virtue, and mutual fidelity. Within its crossings, the golden ratio repeats like a heartbeat. Each segment teaches that beauty is consistency under transformation. You must understand, this is not superstition. It is a discipline of noticing how simple rules generate graceful forms and how character is a geometry of choices. To the Pythagorean mind, the star says, keep your measures, keep your vows, keep your balance. Mathematics and ethics meet at the same angle, and harmony is the proof. Look up. Every 8 years, from Earth's vantage, Venus sketches 5 kisses against the zodiac, returning to nearly the same dates and places, a rows of conjunctions that resembles the star we draw by hand. Ancient watchers could not miss it. Modern observers still chart the rhythm with wonder. The lesson is elegant. The sky models recurrence with slight deviation, a dance of almost that never collapses into sameness. What many don't see is that this celestial pentagram is not mysticism against science. It is astronomy as astonishment, precision that deepens reverence. As above, not as slogan, but as pattern, beautiful, measurable, and true. In Christian Europe, the star enters prayer. Medieval poets placed the pentangle on Gawain's shield, a weave of fives, senses, fingers, joys, wounds, and knightly virtues, an endless knot of fidelity. Devotion reads the figure as memory, the 5 wounds of Christ carried as courage into trial, the geometry of grace inscribed on wood and will. You must understand, symbols survive by utility. Here the pentagram holds a moral syllabus, courage tempered by piety, strength yoked to mercy. The star does not conjure, it concentrates. It teaches the knight to keep his measures when fear unthreads his resolve. Balance again, but now, as vow. Renaissance magi inherit this braid of math and meaning. Humanists and occult philosophers map the 5 classical elements to the points and use the star as a diagram of correspondence. Mind over matter is a discipline, not a boast. Agrippa and later orders codify ritual geometries not to escape the world, but to order it. Inner weather first, then outward craft. What many don't see is that such diagrams were also technologies of attention. You draw the line to be drawn by it, to be measured by what you measure. The pentagram in this age is an instrument, calibrated for discernment, not spectacle. Modernity changes the stage, but not the stakes. In the 19th century, Eliphas Levi's image of Baphomet reframes inversion, equilibrium, and the currency of symbols. Later, the Church of Satan formalizes the inverted form with a goat's head as its emblem. Public imagination fuses inverted star with transgression, and controversy eclipses continuity. Yet history is messier. An emblem can be humanistic protest or theatrical defiance, depending on the hand that wields it. The point remains, a symbol amplifies intent. Balance still governs power. An inverted proportion without wisdom destabilizes the bearer first. The geometry never sleeps. It corrects, or it breaks. Meanwhile, new religious movements reclaim the upright star. In contemporary Wicca and allied neo-pagan streams, the encircled pentagram, pentacle, signifies the elements unified by spirit, nature honored as teacher, boundary drawn as care. Here the circle is not a wall, but a commitment. Keep energies in right relation. Keep actions accountable to wholes. You must understand, protection is not fear. It is stewardship. When earth, water, air, fire, and spirit hold each other to measure, practice becomes ecology of the self. The same thesis hums beneath it all. Harmony is chosen, rehearsed, renewed, an ethic rendered in angles and breath. So the story we tell is not of a symbol falling from heaven complete, nor of a sign stolen by villains, but of a star that tests its keepers. Across millennia, it asks the same question in different tongues. Can you hold your forces in proportion? Can your will serve wisdom? Can your knowledge serve love? What many don't see is that the pentagram, rightly read, is a mirror. It does not make you pure or profane. It makes you legible to yourself. In the next part, we follow the earliest lines more closely, Sumer, Egypt, Greece, to see how origin shapes obligation and how balance becomes right. If you are listening for the first time, let this be your orienting star. Balance is not neutrality. It is mastery under mercy. It is proportion applied to power. The pentagram teaches this without a word. Its crossings warn against shortcuts. Its symmetry rewards patience. Keep this thesis near as we proceed. Spirit crowns matter, or matter buries spirit. Either way, the angles tell the truth. Throughout history, those who flourish under this sign do not conquer the world. They consent to its measures. And when they do, their work aligns with a rhythm older than empires and newer than breath. Now we turn the page of time. What if the first shape, drawn by human hands, was not random but revelation? What if every civilization that rose from dust rediscovered the same fivefold secret? You must understand, the pentagram was never invented. It was remembered. It appeared wherever minds sought to name order. Long before philosophy or scripture, its lines whispered of proportion, the balance between flesh and flame. To the ancients, this was not ornamentation, it was cosmology, inscribed in clay and blood. The pentagram is humanity's oldest mirror, showing that to know the heavens, one must first map the self. In Sumer, the star marked sovereignty and the meeting of worlds. On clay tablets, priests traced 5 wedges to represent the 4 cardinal directions and the sacred center, the place where gods and mortals exchanged breath. It was called the Star of Ishtar, symbol of love, war, and divine law. Each point radiated purpose: north for wisdom, south for endurance, east for awakening, west for rest, and the center for truth. This symmetry reflected not superstition, but survival. The Sumerians believed balance was divine mathematics, each direction a limb of cosmic order. Egypt received the symbol not as an import, but as a resonance. On temple walls, 5 pointed stars clustered in ceilings painted midnight blue, each representing souls reborn into eternity. To Egyptian priests, the pentagram mirrored the heliacal rising of Sirius, the star that heralded the Nile's flood and life's renewal. You must understand, geometry in Egypt was theology written in stone. To measure was to worship. The fivefold star was their promise that death was not chaos, but recalibration. The souls returned to equilibrium with the sun's eternal rhythm. In the hands of the Pythagoreans, the pentagram transformed from sacred emblem to scientific proof. They called it Hygeia, the seal of health and harmony. Within its lines, they found the golden ratio, a numerical heartbeat recurring in shells, flowers, and galaxies. For them, this was evidence that beauty itself obeyed law. The star was a lesson in ethics. Just as proportion governs form, virtue governs life. What many don't see is that mathematics was their prayer, calculation, their meditation. Through number, they sought the divine, balance, rendered as proof. Among the Babylonians, the star symbolized Venus, the goddess who appears at dawn and dusk. Over 8 years, Venus traces a perfect fivefold path across the sky, a celestial pentagram. The ancients saw in this rhythm a conversation between heaven and earth, desire ascending, wisdom descending. Venus's dance was their calendar of light and shadow, reminding them that even chaos repeats with grace. To observe this pattern was to witness order, born from wandering, love measured in orbits, and harmony written in motion. In early Hebrew mysticism, the 5-pointed form represented the divine name extended into creation, the breath of God crossing into matter. Each point symbolized a stage of manifestation, from the unspoken to the spoken, from the eternal to the tangible. The center was the covenant itself, as above, so within. The star's geometry thus became a covenantal diagram, an assurance that the cosmos and conscience were built from the same ratios. The pentagram was not idolatry, it was identity, a map of divine structure reflected in human proportion. The Persians inherited the symbol through Ishtar's transformation into Anahita, goddess of pure waters. For them, the 5 points represented the sanctified elements that sustain creation: fire, air, earth, water, and light. Fire was divine will, Air was thought, earth was body, water was compassion, and light was truth. Rituals using the star sought alignment with these forces. To the Zoroastrian mind, purity meant harmony among the five, corruption their imbalance. Thus, the pentagram stood as guardian of equilibrium, the moral architecture of existence itself. Across the Aegean, the star crossed into mystery cults and healing temples. Priests of Asclepius inscribed pentagrams on amulets, believing the geometry could restore what illness had disordered. The star was medicine made visible, a diagram of vitality. Each point invoked a force within the patient: will to live, clarity of thought, courage to endure, tenderness to forgive, and spirit to heal. To trace the pentagram was to reassemble the self, limb by luminous limb. Even then they knew healing begins when form regains proportion. Among the Celts, the fivefold star emerged in wood and song, its angles aligned with sacred groves and festivals. For them, it symbolized the cyclical nature of life: birth, growth, decay, death, and renewal. The Druids taught that these were not separate events, but phases of one spiral, as each point fed the next. The pentagram became a compass for ritual time, a way to remember that the year, like the soul, folds endlessly inward to be reborn. Balance here was seasonal, breathing with the land itself. By the time these civilizations faded into dust, the star had already transcended language. It no longer belonged to a people, but to pattern itself. Every culture rediscovered it as if guided by memory, and each called it holy for a different reason. The Sumerians saw direction, the Greeks number, the Egyptians eternity, the Celts rebirth. Yet beneath every meaning lay the same truth: the pentagram is balance made visible. As we move to the next part, we descend into the secret chambers, where this symbol was no longer worshipped, but used. What if every line of the pentagram was a doorway? What if what looks like a symbol is in truth a key, turning unseen locks within the fabric of reality? You must understand, when ancient knowledge retreats from the temples of stone, it hides within symbols. By the time the empires of old had fallen, the pentagram had shifted from a public emblem to a private initiation. Those who could read its geometry no longer carved it on altars. They carried it within the mind. Its lines became instructions, each point a gate to an inner world where the soul learns the laws of creation by walking them. In the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, the pentagram was taught as the map of man. The body itself mirrored the star: head, 2 arms, 2 legs, the divine proportions inscribed in flesh. As above, so below was not a proverb, but a revelation. The cosmos was a body, and the body was a cosmos. The initiate learned that true mastery was not escape from matter, but harmony within it. Spirit ruled matter when the 5 limbs obeyed the rhythm of the one breath. Balance was not ascetic denial, but the art of keeping all powers in rightful sequence. In Babylon and beyond, magicians drew the pentagram in the air to command the elements: fire to purify, water to heal, air to reveal truth, earth to anchor intent, spirit to seal them all. The figure was never static. It was traced, breathed, sung. The magician's hand became an axis between worlds, aligning human will with cosmic order. What many don't see is that the power was not in the drawing, but in the discipline, the steady heart that could hold contradiction without breaking. To trace the star without balance was to call forces one could not contain. Among the Persians and the later Chaldeans, the star became the cipher of planetary law. Each point corresponded to a celestial body: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the center was the sun, the pulse of divine intelligence. To meditate upon the star was to tune the soul to the music of the spheres. The ancients believed that harmony among the planets mirrored harmony within the self. Discord in heaven was echoed by turmoil in the heart. The pentagram thus became a prayer written in orbit, a covenant between the human pulse and the rhythm of creation. Celtic priests saw the star as the bridge between the visible and the unseen. In their rites, the 5 points aligned with the 5 sacred trees, the 5 festivals, the 5 vows of the soul. Each represented an element of wisdom to be mastered. Knowledge, courage, compassion, restraint, and truth. The Druids taught that to stand at the center of these points was to stand in the still point of existence, the space where destiny bends toward awareness. The star drawn upon the earth was their temple without walls, a geometry that gathered the forces of nature into one listening silence. In the early pagan world, the pentagram was protective long before it was magical. Woven into garments, carved into thresholds, hidden in jewelry, it kept chaos at bay, not through superstition, but through remembrance. To wear the star was to declare one's harmony with the elements, and by extension, with the gods who governed them. Darkness, they believed, could not consume what was already whole. You must understand, the pentagram's power is not to banish evil, but to remind the bearer that disorder cannot dwell in what is complete. The Greek mystery cults deepened the star's interior meaning. To them, the 5 points corresponded not only to the elements, but to stages of the soul's ascent. Earth, birth; water, emotion; air, understanding; fire, transformation; spirit, union. Through initiation, the seeker traversed these gates until the soul stood radiant, unified with the divine. This was the original alchemy, not the changing of metals, but the transmutation of consciousness. The pentagram was their silent curriculum, geometry as revelation, line as ladder. In later Roman mystery traditions, the star evolved into a sigil of personal sovereignty. To mark oneself with it was to declare independence from tyranny of fate and priest alike. Balance became rebellion. Proportion became protest. The initiate stood as a living pentagram, 5-fold, self-contained, reflecting the divine, not as subject, but as co-creator. This, perhaps, is why the symbol began to unsettle empires. A soul in balance is not easily ruled. As centuries passed, secret brotherhoods inherited the star's discipline. The Essenes, the Gnostics, the Hermetic adepts, all guarded its geometry as the pattern of initiation. They taught that each angle opens when approached with a corresponding virtue: purity, courage, focus, reverence, and surrender. The star is both map and mirror. When the virtues align, the inner light kindles, and the adept becomes the very emblem they once revered. The 5-pointed star, then, is not drawn for worship, it is drawn for becoming. Every age that followed, whether by temple, grove, or candlelight, rediscovered the same revelation. Balance is power. The occult traditions did not invent this. They preserved it under new tongues. By tracing the pentagram, they remembered that the universe itself is composed of crossings, light meeting darkness, matter meeting mind, the infinite folded into form. As we move to the next part, we shall see how this secret geometry, once whispered in sanctuaries, began to pass into public view, transformed, reinterpreted, and finally politicized by faiths that feared what it revealed. What if the same star that once guided healers and sages became a mark of fear? What if wisdom itself was branded heresy simply because it could not be owned? You must understand, symbols live many lives. When one empire falls, another inherits its signs, but seldom its meanings. So it was with the pentagram. A form once sung in temples of balance began to tremble beneath new altars. The priests of a rising age saw in it a rival light, one that drew its authority not from dogma, but from proportion. And in proportion, no throne stands above another. As empires turned toward monotheism, the old geometries became suspect. The pentagram, once a key to divine order, was reinterpreted as a cipher of rebellion. Yet in secret, scholars preserved its lines, knowing that truth cannot be erased, only translated. The star survived in manuscripts disguised as decoration, its meaning guarded by those who remembered the ancient dictum: that which is balanced is sacred, and that which is sacred is free. To control such knowledge, faith would first have to redefine it. In early Christianity, the star did not begin as a curse, but as a blessing. It adorned the shields of knights and the windows of cathedrals. The 5 points were said to represent the 5 wounds of Christ: hands, feet, and side, a symbol of divine protection through sacrifice. The upright star was the sign of redemption, a geometry of mercy. But with centuries came fear, and with fear, inversion. The Church began to see in the star's symmetry not salvation, but sedition. The human form within it, the body as temple, was too close to blasphemy for comfort. When the Inquisition rose, the pentagram's light dimmed beneath the weight of suspicion. The same geometry once traced in prayer was now whispered in accusation. Witches, healers, and midwives, those who still use the star in ritual, were branded heretics. What many don't see is that this persecution was not about magic. It was about control. To know the elements, to work with balance directly, was to claim authority without intercession, and power that flows inward cannot be taxed or tamed. Yet even in suppression, the symbol adapted. In the underground halls of the alchemists, it reappeared as the microcosm, the measure of man. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man encodes its form, arms and legs outstretched in a circle, the human figure aligned to the star. The geometry was testimony, not rebellion, the universe inscribed within flesh. Renaissance thinkers saw this as proof of divine architecture, the Creator's signature in the design of the human body. To study the pentagram was to read the mind of God through the mathematics of the soul. The occultists of the later Middle Ages rediscovered the star's operative side. Hermeticists, Kabbalists, and Rosicrucians traced its angles in candlelight, pairing each point with the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. They understood that to command nature, one must first master oneself. The pentagram was both wand and mirror, testing the adept's purity through reflection. When invoked with sincerity, it harmonized. When abused, it fractured. Thus, the true initiate learned not to dominate, but to align. Meanwhile, the Church's fear hardened into doctrine. Anything geometric, mathematical, or natural that bypassed priestly mediation was deemed occult. The pentagram's dual nature made it easy to condemn. Upright, it resembled divine ascent. Inverted, it seemed to summon dissent. But this inversion was metaphor, not malice. A diagram of matter rising to spirit, a teaching that transformation begins below. Yet in the fires of dogma, nuance perished. The inverted star became shorthand for rebellion against heaven, and ignorance claimed another victory. The Enlightenment brought another translation. Freemasons and esoteric philosophers reclaimed the star as the blazing pentacle, a symbol of human reason illuminated by divine proportion. To them, it stood for the power of mind to order chaos and to redeem superstition through understanding. Science rediscovered what the mystics already knew, that nature itself speaks in numbers, and the same ratios that build the cosmos build the heart. Thus, the pentagram crossed once more from religion to revelation, carrying both stigma and salvation in its wake. By the dawn of the modern age, the star had split along two paths, one sacred, one shadowed. To some, it remained the seal of wisdom, balance, and cosmic law. To others, it became the emblem of forbidden power. Artists, magicians, and mystics used it as a lantern to explore the unseen. Inquisitors used it as a brand to mark those who refused to kneel. Yet in both, the same paradox burned. Every attempt to destroy the symbol only proved its endurance. For truth drawn in geometry cannot die. It only waits to be read again. And so, as we close this chapter of conflict, one truth endures beneath the centuries of confusion. The pentagram does not belong to saints or sorcerers. It belongs to balance itself. It is the oldest reminder that creation and destruction are siblings, and that every age must choose which twin to feed. In the next part, we will watch how the star, misunderstood yet indestructible, rose again in the hands of philosophers and revolutionaries, shaping the modern mysticism that still glows behind its 5 silent points. What if the symbol buried by dogma found new life in the very hands that sought reason over revelation? What if geometry itself became the language through which the divine reintroduced itself to humanity? You must understand, the Renaissance was not a rejection of faith. It was its rebalancing. When Europe awoke from centuries of fear, it rediscovered what the ancients always knew: that truth and beauty share a common proportion. The pentagram, long whispered about in shadows, stepped quietly into the open once more, cloaked now, not in ritual, but in art. In Florence, painters and architects sought perfection through mathematics. They rediscovered the golden ratio, phi, hidden within the star's arms, and called it the measure of the gods. Leonardo drew the human body within its geometry. Botticelli hid its spirals in shells and waves. These artists were not mere aesthetes. They were magicians of form. What many don't see is that each canvas and cathedral was a sermon in number. The pentagram's logic shaped domes, faces, music, and even poetry. Beauty itself became evidence of divine order. Geometry made grace. In secret libraries, philosophers reassembled the fragments of Hermetic wisdom. Marsilio Ficino, translating the Corpus Hermeticum, wrote of the soul as a star descending into form. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola declared that man was the image of the cosmos, mutable, creative, divine. The pentagram became their emblem of human potential, the proof that divinity was not distant, but immanent. You must understand, this was the quiet rebellion of intellect, the reclamation of sacred knowledge through reason. The star, once forbidden, now gleamed on the page as philosophy reborn. Alchemy, too, revived the symbol's hidden function. To the alchemist, the 5 points were the stages of the great work: calcinatio, solutio, conjunctio, fermentatio, and coagulatio, the purification of matter and soul. The upright star represented completion. The philosopher's stone achieved through harmony of opposites. The alchemist's laboratory was a temple disguised as science. The pentagram was both roadmap and seal. It whispered that the transformation of lead to gold was only ever metaphor. The true gold was consciousness refined by fire. As the centuries unfolded, the symbol's reach deepened. In the occult manuscripts of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, the pentagram governed the hierarchy of the elements and spirits. It was a mathematical talisman, its lines aligning heaven's laws to earthly practice. Agrippa wrote that to understand its proportion was to perceive the mind of God at work in all creation. Yet even he warned, knowledge without reverence becomes corruption. The star's power is pure only in hands that mirror its symmetry, equilibrium of reason and humility. Meanwhile, in hidden lodges and esoteric fraternities, the pentagram became the seal of initiation. The Rosicrucians called it the star of the magus, the geometry of the enlightened soul. Freemasons saw it as the blazing star, representing the light of conscience, guiding man through the labyrinth of ignorance. When placed at the heart of their rituals, it reminded initiates that true mastery was moral before it was magical. Balance, not ambition, defined the worthy. The symbol thus matured, not as superstition, but as discipline. Science itself could not escape the star's gravity. Johannes Kepler, charting the orbits of planets, found harmony where others saw chaos. His diagrams traced pentagonal symmetry within celestial motion. The geometry of Venus returned, whispering the same truth as Sumer's clay tablets, the heavens dance in fives. Kepler called it the signature of divine architecture. The star, now drawn with compass and quill, united mysticism and mathematics into one continuous revelation. The universe is intelligible because it is musical. The pentagram also shaped the language of the mystical orders that bridged East and West. Sufi masters spoke of the fivefold journey of the heart: submission, love, knowledge, annihilation, and subsistence, as the soul's star unfolding. Kabbalists traced it upon the tree of life as a sign of Tifereh, the balance between mercy and judgment. Even in far China, Taoist geomancers saw in its form the harmony of the five elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Without direct contact, civilizations dreamed the same geometry, proof that truth does not belong to nations, but to numbers. By the late Renaissance, the star had become a scholar's emblem of universal wisdom. To wear it was to declare allegiance not to church or sect, but to the unity of all knowledge. Yet this freedom had its cost. Those who studied its meaning too deeply, Giordano Bruno for instance, were consumed by the very fire they sought to illuminate. He saw the universe as infinite, each soul a spark of the divine. The church saw heresy, the heavens saw symmetry. The pentagram, silent on his manuscripts, glowed in concept: man as star, thought as flame, cosmos as reflection. And so the symbol crossed once again, from mystery to myth, from cathedrals to secret chambers, from painters' studios to astronomers' notebooks. The fivefold star threaded itself through every discipline that sought balance between the seen and unseen. It had survived exile, suppression, and distortion because it carried no creed, only pattern. In its simplicity lay eternity. As we turn to the next part, the age of light gives way to the age of reason, and with it, new forms of rebellion. The pentagram will not fade, but change costume once more, becoming the sign of both revolution and revelation. What if, in the age that sought to replace mystery with measurement, the oldest mystery of all returned disguised as science? What if every equation, every telescope, every revolution of thought still echoed the same geometry traced by forgotten priests? You must understand, the Enlightenment did not banish the sacred, it rephrased it. The divine withdrew from cathedrals into calculus, from prayers into proportions, and there, beneath the instruments of the new world, the pentagram quietly reawakened, not as relic, but as reason's reflection. In the 18th century, as philosophy dethroned superstition, the star re-emerged as the mark of human intellect. To the Freemasons, it was the blazing star, the flame of inner sight, guiding man beyond ignorance. Each point was a principle: wisdom, strength, beauty, justice, and harmony. To stand within its light was to commit to moral geometry, to build not temples of stone, but of virtue. The Masons saw the same truth Pythagoras once whispered: the universe is not ruled by whim, but by ratio, and man becomes divine when he mirrors that order within. Artists, architects, and scientists began to trace the same proportions under new names. They built parliaments, monuments, and observatories upon the golden ratios once considered magical. Nations began to adopt the five-pointed star as emblem and banner. What many don't see is that these were not mere designs of patriotism. They were sigils of philosophy. The Star of Balance, once carved in temple clay, now flew over revolutions. The American flag's constellation of pentagrams was not coincidence. It was the Enlightenment, rendered in fabric: freedom, harmony, and the pursuit of order through will. Alchemy, though mocked by the academies, survived in secret dialects of science. Chemists and astronomers adopted its symbols as metaphors, and the pentagram became shorthand for the unity of natural law. Newton's cosmos, balanced between gravity and grace, mirrored the fivefold harmony of the ancients. The alchemist's maxim, solve et coagula, to separate and reunite, became the scientist's method: analysis and synthesis. The pentagram's lesson endured in every laboratory. That knowledge divides only to reunite at a higher understanding. In the salons of Paris and London, philosophers debated the boundaries of reason, yet many kept small talismans or sketches of the star in their journals. They called it l'étoile du savoir, the star of knowing. It reminded them that logic without wonder becomes tyranny of thought. Voltaire and Goethe saw the pentagram as allegory for human self-realization, the mind mastering nature through equilibrium. Goethe would later write, in Faust, that the star wards off the demonic, not through superstition, but through self-awareness. For what is evil, he asked, but imbalance given form? Mystics of the new era found in the star a bridge between science and spirit. The Rosicrucians reappeared, claiming descent from ancient Egypt and Babylon, teaching that geometry was the grammar of God. Their pentagram bore letters spelling S-A-L-V-E, salvation through knowledge. Each line represented a virtue, each intersection a choice. You must understand, in these circles, intellect and intuition were not enemies. The star united them, reason pointing upward, imagination grounding it. They believed that enlightenment was not conquest of mystery, but cooperation with it. In political revolutions too, the star's meaning transformed. It became the emblem of sovereignty and equality. The 5 points were said to stand for the 5 senses, the democracy of perception itself. To the revolutionaries of France, this symbol spoke of human potential unchained from divine right. The pentagram's geometry, perfect yet impartial, embodied their creed: no man above another, no line without balance. Thus, a sigil once traced by mystics entered flags, coins, and constitutions. Geometry became governance. Across the Atlantic, the founders of a new world engraved the same emblem into their seals and architecture. The 5-pointed star hovered above eagles and obelisks, embedded in the geometry of Washington, D.C. The builders knew its dual heritage, scientific and sacred. They believed, as Jefferson once wrote, that the laws of nature and of nature's God were one and the same. The pentagram here stood not for religion, but for the sacredness of reason itself. a light guiding humanity out of feudal dusk into the dawn of self-determination. But as the age of reason expanded, so did its shadow. Industrial smoke obscured the heavens once charted by mystics. The world grew mechanical, precise, yet hollow. What many don't see is that every age of light casts its own darkness. The pentagram, now carved into machines and nations, began to lose its whisper. It became emblem without essence, geometry without grace. Balance turned into ambition. Proportion became domination. The same symbol that once harmonized spirit and matter now served factories, flags, and wars. The star had been reborn, but without memory. Still, the pattern endured, waiting for rediscovery. Beneath rational progress, poets and visionaries began to sense what science could not measure, that intellect alone could not complete the circle. The Romantics would soon rise, carrying the pentagram back into the heart's domain, where emotion and intuition reclaim their seat beside reason. And there, once again, the ancient star would regain its pulse, reminding humanity that light, without shadow, burns rather than illuminates. As we turn to the next part, the pentagram will pass through this crucible of modernity, its lines tested, inverted, and reimagined by the age of rebellion. What if the star that once guarded balance was turned upon itself? What if humanity, in mastering the elements, began to command rather than commune? You must understand, every symbol has two faces, the outer light and the inner flame. When one is worshipped without the other, harmony fractures. As the modern world accelerated through revolution, industry, and empire, the pentagram, long the sign of equilibrium, became mirror to a restless age. Its meaning inverted not by demons, but by men who mistook power for illumination. In the 19th century, secret societies flourished amid a hunger for mystery. The industrial world, stripped of magic, yearned for it anew. Magicians, mystics, and poets resurrected the pentagram as the emblem of occult science. Eliphas Lévy, the French magus, drew it both upright and reversed, teaching that orientation determines meaning. Upright, it crowned spirit above matter, the human striving toward divinity. Inverted, it crowned matter above spirit, the descent into appetite and chaos. But Lévy did not call it evil. He called it understanding in shadow. The inverted star, he said, is not damnation. It is reflection. It shows what happens when creation forgets its source. Lévy's illustration of Baphomet, the horned figure within the inverted pentagram, scandalized the faithful and electrified the curious. Yet even here, the message was balance. Baphomet was not Satan, but symmetry, male and female, light and dark, earth and heaven reconciled. What many don't see is that Lévy's devil was a parable. The refusal to see unity in duality creates fear. The pentagram inverted was his warning to the modern soul. Lose proportion, and wisdom becomes appetite. Keep balance, and even shadow serves light. As the occult revival spread through Europe, the star became both shield and weapon. The Golden Dawn in London adopted it as a sigil of ritual command, teaching initiates to draw it in the air to invoke or banish elemental forces. The 5 points became living thresholds again: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, each governed by a sacred name. In their ceremonies, the pentagram was a compass of consciousness, aligning the magician's intent with cosmic rhythm. Yet outside their temples, newspapers and clergy branded the same symbol as diabolic. Fear once again replaced understanding. Meanwhile, artists and poets embraced the star as rebellion's sign. William Blake etched stars across his prophetic visions, declaring that imagination itself was divine fire. For him, the pentagram represented human creativity unbound by institutional chains. The Romantics and early modernists followed, turning geometry into metaphor. The five-fold star became the artist's signature, the dreamer's flag, the outcast's halo. You must understand, when society mechanizes the soul, symbols become sanctuaries. The pentagram was their reminder that chaos, too, contains symmetry waiting to be sung. In the New World, secret fraternities carried the symbol westward. Within Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and the burgeoning spiritualist movement, it resurfaced as emblem of personal sovereignty, the God within. It adorned temple floors and lodge seals, representing the initiate's inner architecture. Each point became a principle of mastery: will, wisdom, love, justice, and truth. Yet as industry transformed cities into engines and men into numbers, the symbol's quiet meaning was overshadowed by spectacle. Balance turned theatrical, invocation became performance. The sacred geometry of being was commercialized into charm. By the early 20th century, the star's dual identity was fully born. On one hand, it adorned national flags and military insignia, a badge of unity and aspiration. On the other, it sank into occult subcultures, where its inversion became the language of protest. The rise of Thelema under Aleister Crowley further blurred its image. To Crowley, the inverted star was liberation from hypocrisy, a call to reclaim divine power through the will. "Do what thou wilt," he wrote, not as license, but as alignment with one's true purpose. The star, once silent geometry, now thundered as manifesto. But rebellion always risks distortion. Where Levi saw balance, later imitators saw defiance. The 20th century's fascination with darkness, its art, its wars, its ideologies, found in the inverted pentagram a convenient mirror. To some, it became the emblem of individual freedom against tyranny. To others, a deliberate provocation against heaven. Rock music, counterculture, and theater of the absurd adopted it as spectacle, half jest, half ritual. What many don't see is that the symbol was never mocking God. It was mocking certainty. It demanded the courage to confront the divine within the abyss. Yet beneath the noise, the old wisdom remained. Every inversion conceals a reflection. Every rebellion hides a prayer. The pentagram's two orientations are not enemies. They are phases of the same truth. Spirit descends into matter to know itself. Matter ascends through spirit to remember. The upright and the inverted are breath and exhale, day and night. To condemn one is to deny the cycle that sustains both. The wise magician, the true philosopher, knows that even the fallen star is still light traveling home. And so, as the modern era roared toward its mechanized dawn, the pentagram stood at every threshold between sacred and profane, intellect and instinct, reason and reverence. It was the mirror of mankind itself, luminous, inverted, yet never extinguished. In the next part, we will enter the present age, the psychological and symbolic rebirth of the pentagram, where science and soul converge once again, and humanity learns, perhaps at last, that every shadow is only light turned inward. What if the star no longer lived in temples, lodges, or secret manuscripts, but within the human mind itself? What if the geometry of the cosmos became the architecture of consciousness? You must understand, the 20th century was not the death of mysticism. It was its migration inward. The external symbols of old, reassembled within psychology, philosophy, and art, each rediscovering the pentagram not as superstition, but as metaphor for the inner cosmos. The shape that once governed heavens now traced the map of the human soul. Carl Jung, exploring the hidden mechanics of the psyche, revived the language of symbols that religion had forgotten. He taught that the star, the mandala, the circle, all are mirrors of individuation, the process by which the fragmented self becomes whole. The 5 points of the pentagram mirrored the psyche's components: instinct, emotion, thought, intuition, and spirit. When aligned, these form the balanced self, the archetype of harmony. What many don't see is that Jung's psychology was geometry disguised as therapy. The star, reinterpreted, became the emblem of integration, the union of opposites, the redemption of shadow. To the humanistic thinkers that followed, Maslow, Rogers, Campbell, the pentagram's pattern revealed itself in every myth and story. The hero's journey, they said, is a 5-fold path: call, descent, trial, revelation, and return. Each stage corresponds to a point of the star, and the crossing lines show that no step stands alone. Growth is not ascent, but circulation, each triumph demanding humility, each descent concealing light. The geometry of myth became psychology's proof that meaning is not linear, but cyclical. The star does not point forward. It revolves, eternally balancing motion and stillness. In art, the modernists turned inward as well. Painters like Kandinsky and Mondrian abandoned realism to capture pure proportion, the unseen harmony of existence. Their canvases were pentagrams unfolded, color and line seeking equilibrium. The Bauhaus movement, merging craft and philosophy, built its designs upon the same ratios Pythagoras once revered. In abstraction, the ancients returned. Geometry, stripped of religion, became revelation once again. You must understand, the modern artist was not escaping meaning, but restoring it, through form that spoke a silent theology of balance. The star also found a new voice in literature and cinema, where the archetype of the fallen light mirrored the century's anxieties. Films of horror and wonder twisted its image, at once sacred and sinister, savior and warning. Yet even in distortion, the pentagram served its oldest function, to make the hidden visible. Humanity's fascination with good and evil, hero and monster, mirrored the duality inscribed in its lines: the inverted and the upright, the conscious and the unconscious. These were no longer opposites, but reflections. Every villain carried a broken point of the same star. In philosophy, existentialists and mystics alike began to rediscover the ethics of proportion. Kierkegaard's leap of faith, Nietzsche's eternal return, Heidegger's being and time all circle the same realization. Truth is not found in extremes, but in tension. The pentagram, whether named or not, haunted their thought. It was the invisible diagram of balance between freedom and responsibility, chaos and order. The 5 points became 5 questions. Who am I? What do I desire? What restrains me? What sustains me? What transcends me? Together, they outlined the architecture of meaning. In the emerging fields of science, pattern once again met philosophy. Physicists discovered symmetry in the subatomic world. Biologists traced golden ratios in DNA and flowers. The stars' mathematics reappeared in galaxies, molecules, and even human limbs. The microcosm and macrocosm reflected each other, as the ancients always claimed. What many don't see is that science, in seeking to explain, rediscovered reverence. The cosmos, when seen clearly, is not mechanical, it is musical. The pentagram hums in every spiral of life, a silent harmony that mathematics merely translates. Spiritual movements of the 20th century, from Wicca to New Age philosophy, restored the star to ritual. but with new meaning. The pentacle became the symbol of wholeness, not fear, a reminder that divinity and matter are partners, not enemies. Each point represented an aspect of being: body, emotion, mind, intuition, and spirit, bound by the circle of unity. To trace it was to affirm completeness. I am of earth and air, fire and water, and of the unseen that binds them. The modern witch, psychologist, and philosopher shared the same truth in different tongues. Healing is geometry remembered. Technology too inherited the symbol's pulse. In the age of networks and algorithms, the five-fold logic of balance reappeared as systems thinking, the understanding that every node affects every other. The pentagram's ancient warning, "Disturb one point, and all tremble," echoes now in ecology, cybernetics, and social design. The web humanity built is a mirror of the stars' pattern: lines crossing, energies flowing, unity disguised as complexity. Whether through code or ritual, we have redrawn the same figure in light. And so, the star that once ruled temples now rules thought. No longer a mark of gods or devils, it has become the emblem of integration, the marriage of intellect and instinct, reason and reverence. The psychologist calls it wholeness. The mystic calls it awakening. The scientist calls it pattern. But the truth is one. The pentagram is the psyche made visible. As we move to the next part, we step into the present, where humanity, faced with its own creations of artificial mind and mechanical power, must decide whether to repeat the ancient imbalance or finally live by the geometry it was born from. What if the oldest sign of balance found new form in circuits and screens? What if the same geometry that once guided mystics through temples now guided humanity through data? You must understand, the 21st century did not abandon symbols, it digitized them. Every pixel, every network, every algorithm is built upon proportion, symmetry, and feedback. The pentagram, ancient emblem of balance, reawakens now as blueprint for survival in an age of acceleration. For even in our code, the old truth endures. Harmony sustains, excess destroys. In modern spirituality, the pentagram has emerged from centuries of fear, reclaimed by seekers of integration. Wiccans, hermeticists, and mystics speak of it not as a weapon, but as a mirror. The 5 points, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, now align with ecology, thought, will, emotion, and awareness. The circle enclosing it no longer binds demons, but intention, a boundary of mindfulness in a fractured age. To trace it in ritual today is to declare, I am in right relation to all things. The star, once feared, becomes therapy, a shape of healing drawn in light. In psychology and wellness, its resonance deepens. The 5 points have become archetypal again. The physical body, the emotional heart, the rational mind, the creative spark, and the transcendent self. Modern mindfulness programs, though stripped of religious vocabulary, echo the same proportions: balance the senses, align the breath, center awareness. You must understand, humanity's new temples are built not of stone, but of attention. The pentagram survives as invisible scaffolding for the art of presence. Artists, filmmakers, and designers use it not as superstition, but as language. The perfect star, five-fold symmetry, embodies harmony that the eye instinctively trusts. Logos, architecture, and cinematic compositions all rely upon its ancient ratio. From the framing of heroes in film to the layout of technology interfaces, its geometry organizes perception itself. The viewer may not see the star, but the body remembers. The pentagram remains the hidden pulse of aesthetics, structure that pleases, because it reflects the inner pattern of being. Meanwhile, the occult and the digital intertwine. In the corners of the internet, new mystics merge ancient ritual with modern code. Sigils are drawn in fractals, invocations written as algorithms. The pentagram becomes an interface, the crosspoint between spirit and system. Some call it techno-magic, others call it cybernetics. Yet beneath the jargon lies the same instinct, to map connection, to maintain balance in an infinite web. In this, the star returns to its first role, as compass. It points not north or south now, but toward coherence in an age of noise. Science itself circles back to the symbol's wisdom. Quantum physicists describe reality as relational, each particle defined by the network of its interactions. Neuroscientists map consciousness as a dynamic star of nodes: sensation, memory, emotion, intuition, awareness, firing in unity. Astrobiologists trace pentagonal harmonics in planetary orbits. Everywhere, pattern repeats. What many don't see is that science, in stripping away myth, has revealed its skeleton. The universe behaves as the ancients claimed: ordered, relational, musical. The pentagram's geometry is not belief, it is physics, translated through awe. In modern mysticism, the inverted star has also evolved. It no longer signals rebellion against heaven, but rebellion against false separation. The downward point, once misread as defiance, now represents descent of spirit into matter, compassion made physical. It is the reminder that divinity is not elsewhere, but here, incarnate in every act of care. The true inversion is not blasphemy, it is empathy, turning transcendence towards service. Thus, even the shadow of the star finds redemption when reinterpreted through consciousness rather than fear. Technology's prophets echo this in their own tongue. Artificial intelligence, networks, and virtual realities all follow the pentagram's structure. Data, earth, processing, air, energy, fire, connectivity, water, and purpose, spirit. The danger, as ever, is imbalance. When one point dominates, systems collapse. A world ruled by data without compassion burns, by emotion without logic drowns. The star's lesson remains the same: power without proportion becomes poison. In digital age, the pentagram is not archaic, it is essential ethics disguised as geometry. Across cultures, new rituals emerge. Environmentalists draw the star to represent ecological wholeness. Each point a biome, the circle the planet itself. Educators use it to teach balance of faculties: think, feel, act, reflect, create. Even corporations, unknowingly, build it into their models of innovation and wellness. The ancient language returns under new dialects, yet its heart unchanged. The fivefold harmony that sustains civilization. What many don't see is that progress without myth is amnesia. The pentagram restores memory, reminding a mechanical world that it too was born from wonder. And so, in this modern age of light without silence, the pentagram stands again, not as relic, not as rebellion, but as reconciliation. It is the symbol of integration, the meeting of code and conscience, mind and mystery. Its lines remind us that technology, like magic, magnifies intention. The question is not whether the star is good or evil, it is whether we are in balance when we wield it. As we approach the final part, we must ask, what does this symbol demand of the future? And what truth, hidden since the first line was drawn in clay, is it still trying to teach us? What if the star was never a symbol at all, but a mirror, showing us not what to worship, but what we already are? What if every civilization that traced its 5 lines was not inventing meaning, but remembering it. You must understand. The pentagram is not a sign of belief. It is the architecture of being. It endures because we are built from the same pattern. The five senses, the five fingers, the five movements of breath, all whisper the same silent law. Harmony sustains, dissonance consumes. In this final reflection, the star no longer speaks of gods or empires. It speaks of us. Throughout history, each point has carried a name, a face, a philosophy. To the ancients, it was the fivefold world: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. To philosophers, it was the virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, and faith. To mystics, it was the path: birth, knowledge, love, loss, and transcendence. But beneath every translation lies the same geometry: balance among forces. The star is humanity's oldest instruction manual. 5 doors we must keep in alignment, lest the house of self collapse. Each era that forgets this must relearn it through its own storms. The modern world, armed with its machines and miracles, has redrawn the star in steel and signal. Yet the lesson remains unaltered. Technology magnifies the ancient elements: earth as resource, air as information, fire as energy, water as network, spirit as intention. But when spirit, the 5th point, falls away, the other 4 devour one another. You must understand, progress without proportion is the inverted star, radiant and ruinous. The pentagram endures to warn, not to condemn, to remind us that mastery without mercy is imbalance disguised as power. In this geometry lies a secret of perception itself. The upright star teaches ascent, the discipline of rising through matter toward meaning. The inverted star teaches descent, the grace of bringing meaning back into matter. Together, they form a single breath: inspiration and incarnation, the cosmic inhale and exhale. The wise do not choose between them. They breathe both. The true magician, scientist, or saint is not one who escapes the world, but one who stands at its center, arms outstretched, balance between heaven and earth. Philosophers of every age have glimpsed this truth in fragments. The Buddhists call it the middle way, the Greeks the golden mean, the Taoists the way between. The pentagram is their shared diagram, though drawn in silence. It teaches that perfection is not stillness, but dynamic balance, the continual readjustment of forces in motion. Harmony, then, is not an achievement. It is a practice, a breathing alignment, renewed each moment. The star is not static. It turns endlessly, like the wheel of creation itself. Look closely at its form. Every line crosses another. Every intersection creates a new center. This is the secret. Unity is not uniformity. It is complexity in agreement. The universe is woven from intersections, and so are we. The pentagram's lesson is that opposition is not enemy, but necessity. Fire needs water, strength needs tenderness, logic needs wonder. Each point protects the others from excess. To live by the star is to live consciously, aware that every action, thought, and word redraws the geometry of one's soul. The great faiths once carved this truth into stone. Now it must be written in conduct. The age of symbols gave way to the age of awareness. The pentagram's new temple is the human conscience, its altar, the quiet moment of choice. Every time we act with balance, between thought and feeling, reason and reverence, we restore the lost symmetry of the world. The true magic of the star is ethical, not esoteric. It calls us not to summon spirits, but to summon integrity. And yet, there is wonder still. For in the night sky, Venus continues her 8-year dance, tracing the same pentagram she drew for Sumerian priests 5,000 years ago. Each orbit, precise and patient, repeats the rhythm of proportion. The heavens still perform the ritual we forgot. The message is constant. Balance is eternal law, not human invention. To align with it is to belong again, to the cosmos, to the rhythm of creation, to ourselves. So, the story ends where it began. A hand in the dust, drawing lines that meet in light. The pentagram, symbol of harmony, heresy, science, and soul, remains the universal signature of awakening. It has survived empires, dogmas, and denials because truth does not require belief, only recognition. The same star that crowns the sky burns behind our eyes. Its geometry is the heartbeat of awareness itself. When we remember this, every act becomes sacred, every breath symmetrical with the cosmos, and thus, as silence follows the last word, the meaning completes its circle. The pentagram was never the mark of angels or demons, but of equilibrium, the living covenant between matter and spirit. It reminds us that creation is not a gift from gods, but a responsibility shared with them. The final truth is simple, profound, and unending. We are the star we have been drawing since the dawn of time, fivefold, luminous, and ever returning to balance. What if the eye carved into stone is not decoration, but instruction? What if the gaze above the pyramid is not watching you, but waiting for you? What if the first light you ever saw is still looking back through you now? You must understand, some symbols are not invented, they are recovered. They reappear wherever civilizations learn to see. The all-seeing eye is one of these returns, an emblem that says awareness precedes power and perception shapes reality. Tonight we follow a single thesis through every age. The eye teaches that consciousness is sovereign, not surveillance, not spectacle. Sovereignty, sight ordered by truth, turning vision into responsibility. Across history, the eye wears many names and masks, yet its function remains constant, to awaken the witness within. It is drawn inside a triangle to teach that true sight stabilizes, 3 points making a frame for revelation. It hovers above an unfinished pyramid to confess the work is ongoing. The world, and we who build it, are not complete. The rays mean emanation. Insight becomes influence. And every placement in temple, seal, or city is deliberate. What many don't see is this. Symbols are technologies. They program attention. The eye is a user interface for the soul, guiding perception from appearance to essence, from fear to fidelity. We begin where myth and mathematics share a language. In Egypt, the eye heals. Horus loses sight in a war with chaos. Wholeness is restored. Order returns. In Ra, the eye burns. Justice as sunlight. 2 currents, mercy and judgment, braided in one gaze. Not passive observing, active alignment. To wear the eye was to swear to balance. Protect the living, guide the dead, keep measure in deed and breath. The message is practical and profound. Perception repairs reality. See clearly, restore proportion. Fail to see, invite disorder. The eye is not superstition. It is governance of the interior, made visible in gold, stone, and story. From Mesopotamia, the radiance of Shamash touches law and kingship. In India, the third eye opens, sight beyond sight, intuition as instrument. Greece abstracts the lesson. Plato's eye of the soul turns from shadow to form. Pythagoras hears number as harmony, sight as ratio. These are not disconnected myths. They are convergent methods. Each culture discovers that seeing truly is a discipline, with effects. Clarity breeds courage, proportion breeds justice, reverence breeds restraint. Throughout history, the eye is less about being watched than becoming watchful. It does not frighten, it focuses. It trains attention until truth can be born without blinking. Enter the hermetic current, where geometry becomes catechism. The triangle shelters the eye because understanding must be housed. Body, soul, spirit, past, present, future, creation, order, return. In alchemy, the upward triangle is fire, transformation, ascent. When an eye inhabits it, perception itself is the fire that refines. Rays signify that insight radiates, first inward as conscience, then outward as culture. The eye is not a threat, but a thesis. What you behold, you become. What you illuminate, you inherit. This is why mystery schools guarded the image. Symbols act. They reposition the observer, and once repositioned, the observer repositions the world. Renaissance and Enlightenment inherit the glyph and translate it for a new stage. The eye enters frescoes and facades, not as ornament, but as pedagogy, reason under providence, liberty under law. On a certain seal, it rises above an unfinished pyramid, crowned with phrases that speak of undertakings and a new order of the ages. Read esoterically, this is not triumphalism, it is accountability. Power must remain incomplete until wisdom descends. The capstone floats because conscience is not yet seated. The symbol asks a political question as old as temples. Will vision govern force, or will force blind vision? Modernity complicates the gaze. Cameras multiply, data accrues, and the eye's image drifts towards surveillance. Yet even as institutions co-opt the glyph, its older current persists. Awakening over watching. Interior authority over external control. What many don't see is that the same symbol can be weaponized against awareness or wielded for it. The difference is intent. In the hands of fear, the eye intimidates. In the hands of integrity, it initiates. It asks you to look through, not at, appearances. To join the lineage of observers who refine the world by refining attention, who understand that clarity is ethical, not merely aesthetic. So let our central idea be plain and persistent. The all-seeing eye teaches that consciousness is sovereign, and sovereignty is service to truth. It summons the witness that stands above impulse and ideology, that judges without hatred and forgives without amnesia. It trains perception to bear complexity, to read symbol and system with equal rigor. The pyramid beneath reminds us that becoming human is architecture. If you listen closely, the eye also corrects a modern error, that knowing is neutral. It is not. Sight shapes outcomes. Observers alter fields. Physically, culturally, spiritually. Attention is agency. You must understand. The myths were teaching method. Ask better questions, see deeper patterns, align with higher order, then act. The eye's radiance is not for spectacle, but stewardship. Light aimed where it heals, exposes, reconciles. To work with the symbol is to volunteer for responsibility, to be transparent to truth, to be accountable for what one sees, to refuse the luxury of blindness when clarity costs. This is our map for the journey ahead. In the next parts, we will follow the eye across deserts and dynasties, sanctuaries and states. We will separate initiation from propaganda, medicine from manipulation. We will read the triangle, the rays, the capstone, the Latin, the rumors, the rites, patiently, proportionally, until utility appears. And when history is cleared of noise, the old message will stand where it always stood. Awaken, align, and complete the work. The page of time is turning. The gaze that once seemed above you is about to look out from within. Say the word, and we continue. What if the first eye was not drawn by human hand, but by light itself? What if the sun, rising over desert and delta, taught the earliest priests that seeing and being seen were the same act. You must understand, the all-seeing eye was born from the marriage of astronomy and awe. Before language, light was law. The ancients learned that vision governs rhythm. Night yields to day, seed to stalk, death to dawn. The eye, carved into clay and temple wall, was not superstition. It was survival encoded in symbol. To see was to live. To understand light was to endure. In Egypt, the eye was not one, but many. The Ujat, the eye of Horus, embodied restoration. Sight torn, sacrificed, then made whole again. The myth is anatomy of awareness, perception lost to chaos, regained through balance. The left eye measured the moon, the right eye the sun, lunar wisdom and solar authority. Together they taught that true vision includes shadow. The priests of Ra wore it as divine lens, believing that to see truth is to create order. Thus the eye became both medicine and mirror, the cure for blindness of soul. The geometry of the eye held knowledge that predated writing. The parts of the Ujat corresponded to fractions: 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64, summing nearly to unity. Even broken, it almost completes the whole. You must understand, the eye itself was a fraction made flesh. It taught that consciousness, though divided by body and time, still approaches perfection through awareness. Each fraction was an act of seeing, and to heal was to integrate perception. What many don't see is that the Egyptians were mapping not anatomy, but the mathematics of mindfulness. Farther east, in Sumer and Babylon, the gods also watched. The eye of Shamash, sun deity and judge, glowed from cylinder seals, marking justice as luminous sight. The king was chosen because he sees. Courts were held in open air so that no oath could hide from the sun's eye. Law itself became an extension of vision, clarity as virtue. The eye here was moral geometry, declaring that seeing truth obligates one to act upon it. To look and to ignore became the first sin. Thus, in clay tablets and codes, perception was already prophecy. Vision binds the viewer to the viewed. In Persia, the concept matured. Ahura Mazda, Lord of Wisdom, was depicted as the radiant eye within a winged circle, eternity observing creation. The Zoroastrians placed mirrors in their temples, not for vanity, but remembrance. Every reflection was judgment and mercy entwined. To stand before one was to face the divine gaze and one's own. What many don't see is that ancient fire altars were optical devices, mirrors of mind training mortals to keep awareness as steady as flame. To extinguish attention was to betray the covenant of light. The eye's command was simple: stay awake. In Greece, vision became philosophy. Plato spoke of the eye of the soul, blinded by shadow and reborn through truth. The gods of Olympus, Helios, Athena, Apollo, all bore aspects of illumination. But beneath the myths, mathematicians and mystics whispered that geometry itself could see. Pythagoras taught that numbers were the eyes of creation, the universe perceiving itself through ratio. In the Delphi temple, the eye evolved into the omphalos, the navel stone of knowing, guarded by serpents that symbolized wisdom and renewal. The message shifted from external deity to internal awakening. The divine sight lives within thought itself. The Eastern world held parallel revelations. In Hindu cosmology, Shiva's third eye burns illusion. Its fire, not destruction, but discernment. In Buddhism, the awakened one is called Tathagata, the one who has seen. The Mayans and Aztecs drew eyes into their temples, equating them with the sun at zenith. The the moment of total clarity. To them, the eye was time embodied. When the shadow disappears beneath the noon light, the cosmos aligns perfectly. Priests read eclipses as the eye closing and reopening, a cosmic blink renewing creation. Their calendars were not tools for control, but communion. To measure time was to converse with eternity. The same geometry that ordered pyramids in Giza governed those in Teotihuacan. The eye watched from every summit, translating sunlight into prophecy. Thus, across continents and centuries, one truth repeated: to see rightly is to sustain order. The eye's earliest language was astronomical, agricultural, ethical, all one. It reminded kings and peasants alike that the same light-feeding crops also witnesses deeds. The eye judged not to condemn, but to calibrate. Its purpose was not fear, but fidelity. What many don't see is that civilization itself grew from this vigilance. The first cities were built around sight lines to the solstice, temples oriented to the gaze of heaven. Observation created architecture, awareness created culture. And so, in the ancient world, the all-seeing eye was neither curse nor conspiracy. It was conscience rendered visible. To wear it, carve it, or pray beneath it was to affirm participation in cosmic reciprocity, the covenant that what we look upon also looks back. The eye's lesson was equilibrium, that clarity sustains creation and blindness births decay. As we move forward, the eye will leave the temples of stone and enter the chambers of mystery, the schools, the secret orders, the hidden sciences. There, its sight will deepen, its meaning will split between sacred wisdom and forbidden knowledge. The next part begins the age of initiation. What if the eye that once ruled temples began to whisper through initiation? What if sight itself became a secret, a threshold, guarded by silence? You must understand, as civilizations matured, truth retreated from public stone into private study. The all-seeing eye, once carved in daylight, descended into mystery schools, where it no longer watched humanity, it awakened it. In the shadowed halls of Alexandria, Memphis, and Eleusis, the eye became emblem of inner transformation. It no longer gazed outward to heaven, but inward to mind, teaching that illumination is not bestowed, it is remembered. In the Hermetic schools of Egypt, the eye was the mirror of nous, divine intellect. To behold it was to realize that seeing and knowing are one act. The initiate was taught, as above, so below. As within, so without the eye, symbolized that eternal symmetry. Those who looked upon it during ceremony were reminded that the divine perceives through human awareness. The triangle enclosing the eye represented the trinity of being, body, soul, and spirit, aligned in harmony. You must understand, Hermetic initiation was not belief, it was architecture of consciousness. The eye was the apex of that invisible pyramid. The Pythagoreans, inheriting Egypt's geometry, carried the eye into Greece as metaphor for divine reason. Their sacred diagram, the tetractys, mirrored the triangle that would later cradle the eye of providence. They saw vision as vibration, the soul harmonizing with the ratios of the cosmos. To see meant to align with truth, mathematically and morally. This was the first philosophy of resonance. The universe is sight expressed as sound, and harmony is simply vision heard through number. The eye here symbolized order that perceives itself, awareness structured by proportion. In the mysteries of Isis, the eye became the promise of rebirth. Initiates descended into darkness to reenact the dismemberment and restoration of Osiris, guided by the light of the goddess's eye, illumination leading the soul from fragmentation to unity. Each ritual was an allegory of perception, healed. Blindness symbolized ignorance, sight, remembrance. The candidate emerged from the temple at dawn, declaring, "I have seen with the eye of Horus." It was not declaration of vision, but of virtue. To see truly was to serve truth. The eye demanded not curiosity, but character. In Kabbalistic mysticism, the eye found new geometry. The Sephirot, 10 emanations of divine will, converged toward Tiferet, the sphere of balance, symbolized as the radiant eye of beauty and mercy. The Kabbalists taught that to gaze upon this inner eye was to harmonize the opposites of mercy and judgment, male and female, heaven and earth. The eye, therefore, was not an external watcher, but an inner reconciler, joining finite perception to infinite awareness. The mystic's task was not to see God, but to become the space through which God sees. Thus, vision became devotion. Among alchemists, the eye was called oculus veritatis, the eye of truth. It watched over furnaces and formulas, symbolizing the awareness that transforms matter as much as Mercury does. They believed that metals were metaphors for the soul, leaden ignorance refined through fire into golden clarity. The eye crowned their manuscripts, often within a radiant triangle, representing the completed magnum opus, matter spiritualized through attention. What many don't see is that alchemy was never chemistry alone. It was ethics in disguise. The furnace was the mind, the fire was insight, the eye, the silent witness that prevented hubris from corrupting transmutation. In the Gnostic texts, the eye becomes paradox. It is the light within the darkness that the darkness cannot comprehend. To the Gnostic, the visible world was a veil, a shadow, cast by a higher light. The true eye was the spark of divine awareness imprisoned in flesh, seeking to awaken. Every myth of blindness and revelation, Oedipus, Samson, Tiresias, echoed this secret. Only through the loss of outer sight can the inner eye open. The initiate's tears were the alchemical solvent that dissolves illusion. Thus, seeing becomes suffering refined into knowledge. When Christianity absorbed these undercurrents, the eye reappeared subtly in sacred art. Byzantine icons placed radiant circles behind saints' heads, symbols of divine sight embodied. The eye of providence evolved from these halos, combining geometry, theology, and philosophy. The triangle represented the Trinity, the eye, omniscience. Yet beneath doctrine, mystics like Meister Eckhart and Hildegard of Bingen still whispered the older truth, that the eye of God and the eye of the soul are one mirror. The eye through which I see God, Eckhart wrote, is the same eye through which God sees me. That line is the heart of every mystery. By the Middle Ages, the eye had migrated into architecture and allegory. Gothic cathedrals placed circular windows, roses of glass, as living eyes of stone. Sunlight pouring through colored geometry was theology rendered in light. Each pattern symbolized the cosmos ordered by divine intelligence. Those who entered such spaces were not being watched, they were being aligned. The cathedral itself was the triangle, and the rose window, the eye at its apex. Even without understanding the esoteric design, the faithful could feel it, sight transformed into serenity, awareness lifting toward the infinite. And so, through the labyrinth of ancient mystery and medieval devotion, the all-seeing eye survived, half symbol, half secret. It was preserved by those who knew that knowledge without humility corrupts, and by those who sensed that to see divinely is to love proportionally. The eye's passage through the occult was not descent into darkness, but descent into depth. It taught that illumination must be earned through transformation. In the next part, the eye will step once more into history's daylight adopted by empires, churches, and revolutions. There, its meaning will fracture between providence and power, between watchfulness and control. What if the eye that once whispered in temples was lifted onto the thrones of kings? What if what began as a symbol of awakening became a tool of rule? You must understand, when power inherits wisdom, it always risks distortion. The all-seeing eye, meant to illuminate the soul, was now turned outward to govern nations, justify hierarchies, and sanctify authority. Yet beneath crowns and cathedrals, the old truth still pulsed. Sight in its purest form is responsibility. But when vision serves ambition, the eye grows cold, its light refracted into control. As empires rose, the eye ascended their banners. In Byzantium, mosaics portrayed Christ Pantocrator, the ruler of all, gazing from domes above the faithful, a celestial eye enthroned in flesh. His look was not wrath, but remembrance. Nothing is unseen. The message, divine or imperial, was clear. Accountability is eternal. In art and scripture alike, heaven's gaze became the conscience of kings. Monarchs claimed divine right, not as tyranny, but as visibility before God. Yet history reveals how swiftly reverence can become rhetoric. The eye that watches to guide was now used to guard power. Medieval theology expanded the symbol's reach. Illuminated manuscripts glowed with triangles containing the radiant eye, Oculus Dei, the eye of God. It appeared in cathedrals and seals, symbolizing omniscience. The triangle's three sides preached the Trinity, the central iris, divine awareness binding creation. But the clergy also found its political utility. The eye became emblem of spiritual surveillance, ensuring loyalty through awe. To live under the gaze of God was to be seen into obedience. What many don't see is that this transformation mirrored a greater shift from inward illumination to outward conformity. The Renaissance rekindled the Hermetic fire beneath the ecclesiastical veneer. Artists like Leonardo, Botticelli, and Michelangelo wove the geometry of the eye into fresco and fresco, proportion as prayer. Churches crowned with domes became massive eyes, looking toward heaven. Yet within the vaults, scholars rediscovered the mystic mathematics of Egypt and Greece. The eye, once theological, became again philosophical. Its rays symbolized intellect, not intimidation. The divine observer was the awakened mind itself, perceiving unity in diversity. For a brief moment, reason and reverence shared the same lens. The eye looked outward and inward at once. Then came the Enlightenment, and with it, the great experiment of reason. Philosophers spoke of the light of understanding. Scientists mapped the stars once worshipped, and architects resurrected sacred geometry for secular purpose. The eye reappeared, this time as the eye of providence. In art, it rose above unfinished pyramids and radiant spheres, now representing divine guidance over human progress. The triangle no longer symbolized solely the Trinity, but the triad of liberty, reason, and natural law. The symbol had evolved beyond creed. It became conscience institutionalized. But every age that claims enlightenment also casts new shadows. As secret orders blossomed across Europe, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the eye found a new temple. Within Masonic lodges, it symbolized the great architect of the universe, an unseen intelligence guiding moral construction. The pyramid beneath represented humanity's ascent through labor, knowledge, and virtue. The floating eye above was the capstone yet to descend, the perfect order not yet achieved. You must understand, here the eye regained its sacred charge. It was not dominance, but discipline. not surveillance, but stewardship. To build rightly was to see rightly. The Freemasons inherited the Hermetic law of proportion, that architecture is ethics made visible. Every lodge was a miniature cosmos, each symbol a sentence in geometry's scripture. The eye reminded the initiate that his deeds were measured against the unseen builder's design. It was humility disguised as grandeur. But outside the lodges, suspicion brewed. The public, seeing the eye in secret rituals, assumed menace where meaning lived. Thus began the centuries-long misunderstanding. The eye of providence mistaken for an emblem of conspiracy rather than conscience. When revolutions spread, first in America, then in France, the eye crossed from mystic halls to political banners. On the Great Seal, it rose above the pyramid of 13 steps, crowned by the phrase Annuit Keptis. He approves our undertakings. Beneath, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. The symbol declared faith in providence and human reason united. The pyramid, unfinished, confessed humility. The nation, like the soul, is always in construction. The eye above did not command. It blessed. It stood for moral vigilance, the eternal reminder that liberty without virtue collapses under its own weight. Yet, as centuries turned, meanings blurred. The eye's radiance dimmed under skepticism. Its sacredness twisted into speculation. What many don't see is that symbols never change meaning by themselves. People change meaning through use. When power forgets purpose, vision becomes surveillance. When knowledge loses compassion, insight becomes intrusion. The eye, once teaching alignment with truth, now served both illumination and fear. It was stamped on currency, hung in chambers, whispered about in secret, the same glyph interpreted as both guardian and jailer. The watcher had become ambiguous, divine to some, demonic to others. Still, within the symbol's quiet geometry, the ancient message endured. The eye's purpose was never to dominate, but to remind, to awaken awareness wherever darkness gathers. From pharaohs to presidents, from temples to towers, it has carried the same admonition, that sight without wisdom is tyranny, and wisdom without sight is blindness. As history moves forward, the eye will step into modernity, its image refracted through science, psychology, and politics. There, amid new technologies and ideologies, it will confront its greatest challenge yet: how to remain sacred in an age where everything is seen, but nothing is understood. What if the eye that once ruled cathedrals found itself reborn in the laboratories of reason? What if the sacred gaze of the divine became the human intellect itself? You must understand, the Enlightenment did not extinguish mysticism, it refined it. The all-seeing eye that once crowned temples and thrones now floated above declarations, inventions, and manifestos. The light that once burned upon altars became the flame of inquiry. Humanity began to see itself as both subject and seer, creator and creation. The eye of God evolved into the eye of reason, the mirror where heaven and man confronted one another as equals. In the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet revolution of the mind unfolded. The Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Masonic traditions that survived through centuries of secrecy began to merge with the rational philosophies of Descartes, Newton, and Locke. The result was not disbelief, but redefinition. God was no longer a remote monarch, but the organizing intelligence of the cosmos. The eye of providence, once a religious icon, became symbol of universal order. Every law of nature was a verse of divine scripture written in geometry. To understand was to worship. To see was to serve truth through reason. In this transformation, architecture became theology's new temple. The builders of cathedrals had used stone to express divinity. The architects of republics used symbols to express principle. The eye, placed above an unfinished pyramid, declared that the work of humanity was sacred only when pursued under the gaze of wisdom. The message was subtle but radical. Divine oversight was not distant. It was human conscience elevated. The pyramid's base represented the multitude, its apex the ideal, and the eye the moral compass that must guide the climb. Progress without awareness was profane. Knowledge without humility, dangerous. The Freemasons became the bridge between the sacred and the secular. They inherited the eye as emblem of the great architect, the unseen order that binds creation. To the initiate, it meant that moral building mirrored physical construction. Every decision was a stone, every virtue a beam. The eye symbolized inner supervision, the continual remembrance that one's actions must fit the pattern of the greater design. Yet outside the lodges, the world saw mystery and power where there was discipline and philosophy. The eye became misunderstood again, its light mistaken for control rather than conscience. Across the Atlantic, the symbol found its new stage. The Founding Fathers, many steeped in Enlightenment thought and Masonic allegory, placed the eye upon the great seal of a new nation. To them, it represented divine favor upon human endeavor, the unbroken watch of providence over a republic built on reason. The floating capstone symbolized potential not yet fulfilled. The Latin inscriptions, Annuit Keptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum, spoke of divine sanction and new beginnings. The eye here was not tyranny, but trust, a compact between heaven and humanity that progress must remain moral, not mechanical. But the same century that crowned the eye with reason also fractured it with rebellion. Revolutions across Europe and the Americas borrowed its imagery, yet twisted its meaning. The eye became emblem of vigilance for some and of vengeance for others. Where one saw liberty's guardian, another saw authority's spy. You must understand, symbols are mirrors. What they reveal depends on who looks. The eye of providence reflected the moral clarity of those who served balance and the ambition of those who sought control. Thus began the duality that still defines it: illumination versus domination, awareness versus oversight. As the Industrial Revolution dawned, the eye's geometry entered machinery and design. Engineers studied proportions sacred to antiquity. Inventors spoke of mechanical eyes, lenses, telescopes, cameras that could extend human sight. Science, unknowingly, fulfilled an ancient prophecy. The power once attributed to gods was now technological. The eye multiplied, no longer spiritual, but literal, scattered across microscopes and observatories. Humanity, seeking to understand creation, recreated the eye in glass and metal, but every extension of vision demanded ethics to match. The more we saw, the less we remembered why seeing mattered. Artists and philosophers of the Romantic Age felt this loss. They painted and wrote of the eye not as symbol of reason, but of yearning, the lost gaze of the divine amid progress. William Blake, seeing angels in geometry, warned that the eye of intellect must be softened by the heart. May God us keep from single vision and Newton's sleep, he wrote, fearing a world where sight divorced from soul would blind itself with brilliance. Thus, the eye split into two, the luminous and the hollow. Illumination became enlightenment for some, surveillance for others. Yet even as the world mechanized, the eye's deeper meaning endured in those who listened. Philosophers spoke of inner vision, psychologists of insight, mystics of awakening. Each rediscovered that the eye's power was not in observation, but awareness, the capacity to perceive without possession. The same light that illuminated the universe could illuminate the conscience. What many don't see is that the age of reason was never meant to replace mystery. It was meant to refine it. The eye remained the bridge, the eternal triangle linking logic, morality, and wonder. And so, as the 18th century gave way to the 19th, the eye hovered between reverence and rebellion. It adorned state seals, cathedrals, and currency. It flickered in paintings and architecture. Some saw it as God's blessing, others as empire's brand, but its geometry remained incorruptible. The triangle, the iris, the rays, they still spoke of harmony, vigilance, and higher law. As we step into the next chapter, the eye will meet its shadow. Science will become industry. Awareness will become control. And the eye that once awakened mankind will now be mirrored in steel, in glass, and in the machinery of modern power. What if the eye that once symbolized inner awakening began to look outward through steel and smoke? What if the world, in learning to master matter, forgot to master itself? You must understand, the 19th century was an age of miracles and blindness. Humanity multiplied its vision through lenses, cameras, and machines, but each invention that expanded sight also narrowed understanding. The eye, once the emblem of awareness, became the engine of observation. Empires adopted its form not to enlighten, but to administer. The gaze that once guided conscience now measured production, mapped colonies, and quantified life. Industrialization reshaped the sacred geometry into a mechanical one. The triangle became the blueprint, the pyramid became the factory, and the eye became the supervisor. Where monks once illuminated manuscripts beneath divine light, clerks now filled ledgers under fluorescent imitation. Observation turned from spiritual discipline to economic imperative. Efficiency became the new deity, and the eye, its idol. Railways, telegraphs, and global trade formed a lattice of vision. The earth itself transformed into a grid. The human dream of omniscience materialized, but hollow. What many don't see is that the eye of providence, in its descent, became the eye of prophet. Empires, too, learned to weaponize vision. Maps, surveys, and census records replaced myth and legend. To see a territory was to claim it. The eye of God became the eye of empire. From the British colonial globe to Napoleonic iconography, the symbol of divine watchfulness mutated into one of dominion. The observer no longer sought to understand the world, but to own it. This was the inversion of light. The more humanity illuminated the earth, the more it shadowed its own heart. The eye, detached from reverence, became extraction. Knowing turned into control. Science itself, though born from wonder, mirrored this duality. The telescopes that revealed the cosmos also reduced heaven to mechanics. The microscopes that discovered the cell also dissected mystery. The eye's expansion became both triumph and tragedy. For every insight that deepened knowledge, another stripped away meaning. The rational gaze devoured what it could not revere. You must understand, vision without virtue degrades into scrutiny. The eye, once symbol of unity, now fragmented into millions of instruments, each sharp, each blind to the whole. Humanity was seeing more than ever, yet understanding less. Art, sensing this fracture, began to protest. The Romantics painted nature as the lost temple. Poets like Wordsworth and Blake invoked the eye as memory of the sacred. They mourned the passing of inward sight beneath the glare of progress. The world is too much with us, they warned, seeing in the factories and cities the the dimming of the divine flame. For them, the eye was now a ghost, the divine witness turned by industry into machinery. Yet their lament kept its spark alive. Through poetry and art, the eye remembered its older purpose, to heal perception through beauty. Religion, too, adapted to the new order. The eye of providence remained on altars and cathedrals, but its meaning softened. It was reinterpreted not as surveillance, but as comfort, a symbol that even in an age of machines, some eternal intelligence still observed with compassion. Painters placed the eye in rays of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Churches built it into stained glass windows like patient sentinels over progress. The sacred gaze lingered quietly, while the secular gaze thundered loud. Both eyes coexisted, the divine and the industrial, watching the same humanity stumble between faith and function. In secret societies and esoteric circles, however, the eye kept its original flame. The Rosicrucians, the Theosophists, and later the Hermetic revivalists of the 19th century taught that the eye must be internalized again. Blavatsky wrote of the spiritual sun behind the physical one, the inner eye that alone perceives unity behind diversity. The occultists warned that humanity's external seeing would enslave it unless matched by awakening within. The eye in their diagrams no longer crowned pyramids, but hearts. Illumination, they said, is not invention, it is remembrance. Machines might mimic vision, but they cannot awaken it. Meanwhile, the rise of photography and cinema gave the eye new form entirely. For the first time in history, sight could be recorded, replayed, and replicated. The lens became the modern oracle. To capture was to possess, to project was to persuade. The eye entered culture not as God, but as storyteller. Yet behind every image, the ancient geometry persisted. Triangle of camera, aperture of focus, light descending through lens, a technological echo of the old Trinity. Humanity had built a new pantheon of vision without realizing it. The eye had evolved into artifice, yet its pulse was unmistakably sacred. Politically, the eye grew ominous again. Nations built bureaucracies of observation, surveillance of citizens, statistics of lives, files upon files. What had begun as divine awareness now returned as systemic watchfulness. The moral eye of providence became the mechanical eye of the state. The irony is profound. Humanity, once terrified of gods that saw too much, had become its own omniscient deity. Yet beneath this machinery, some still whispered the countercurrent truth, that real seeing requires empathy, not analysis. The eye's ancient promise survived only where conscience outlasted curiosity. And so the 19th century ended with two gazes fixed upon humanity, one outward, vast and mechanized, the other inward, quiet and sacred. Between them stretched the battlefield of meaning. The eye had become the symbol of modern paradox, enlightenment and exploitation, revelation and repression, invention and isolation. It saw everything and understood almost nothing. Yet the story was not over. In the next part, the eye will enter the 20th century, the age of total vision, where cameras, wars, ideologies, and consciousness itself will turn the ancient symbol into both warning and prophecy. What if the eye, once confined to temples and thrones, spread across every surface of the modern world? What if humanity, in mastering vision, found itself mastered by it? You must understand, the 20th century was not merely an age of progress, it was the age of exposure. Cameras, radars, satellites, and screens multiplied the eye beyond imagination. What had once symbolized divine omniscience became global infrastructure. humanity had recreated God's gaze without God's wisdom. The all-seeing eye now looked through glass and wire, seeing everything but understanding almost nothing. The century began with invention disguised as revelation. Photography had made memory mechanical. Cinema turned it into spectacle. The eye moved from observer to author. It began to write reality. What many don't see is that early filmmakers, like prophets with lenses, understood their art as illumination. To project light upon a wall was to create a modern ritual of seeing. But as cinema spread, the sacred dissolved into entertainment. Vision became commodity, imagination, consumption. Humanity's gaze, once inward, was sold back to it in flickering fragments. The eye's sanctity dimmed beneath applause. As science advanced, the eye expanded to the heavens. Telescopes like Mount Wilson and Hubble pierced the dark, revealing galaxies beyond counting. The eye of man, now cosmic, glimpsed the abyss and called it beauty. For a moment, the symbol's holiness returned. Astronomers spoke of awe, humility, reverence. Yet even here, the paradox persisted. The same technologies that unveiled the stars also built weapons that could eclipse them. The eye that discovered light's speed also birthed fire that could unmake cities. Vision, uncoupled from conscience, became perilous. To see without wisdom is to burn with borrowed light. War industrialized the eye. In the trenches of the Great War, periscopes and reconnaissance balloons gave rise to surveillance as strategy. In the Second World War, the eye became mechanical omnipresence. Spy planes, coded intercepts, radar grids. The eye no longer symbolized the divine. It symbolized domination. Every soldier fought beneath unseen watch. The triangle had inverted again. Not heaven above earth, but machines above men. After Hiroshima, even the flash of the atomic bomb was called a second sun, a blasphemous eye of human creation burning without compassion. The symbol had returned as judgment, but of our own making. In the post-war world, the eye multiplied exponentially. Television entered homes, a glowing pupil staring back from every living room. Propaganda, once carved in stone, now spoke through images and light. Nations realized that control no longer required armies. It required vision. To show was to shape. To broadcast was to bind. The eye became cultural architecture, an endless feedback of watching and being watched. What many don't see is that this was not conspiracy, but consequence. Humanity had democratized the divine gaze, but forgot that the divine also bears responsibility. The camera never blinks. Neither does conscience. Art and literature began to rebel. George Orwell, in 1984, transformed the eye into nightmare. Big Brother is watching you. The sacred became sinister. Omniscience turned oppressive. The symbol that once guided kings toward virtue now haunted citizens into obedience. Artists like Magritte and Dali painted eyes in clouds and clocks, mocking their ubiquity, mourning their lost meaning. The surrealists whispered what prophets once thundered: the eye that sees all but feels nothing becomes blindness itself. True vision requires vulnerability. Without it, even light becomes surveillance. Meanwhile, psychology rediscovered the eye within. Carl Jung's archetypes reframed the ancient gaze as consciousness observing itself. The self, he said, is both observer and observed. The mandala's center, the inner eye of wholeness. In his sketches, eyes appear inside circles and triangles, mirroring the oldest seals of Egypt and Sumer. You must understand. The psyche was repeating the cosmos. The eye, repressed by technology, resurfaced in dreams. While society watched screens, the soul still saw symbols. The unconscious preserved what the conscious world forgot, that true seeing is inward integration, not external control. In the spiritual countercurrents of the century, the Theosophical Society, the Hermetic Order, the mystics of East and West, the eye reawakened as meditation, not machinery. Yogis spoke of the ajna, the third eye, as doorway to higher awareness. Occultists drew it within the triangle again, teaching that the apocalypse, the unveiling, is personal, not planetary. It is the moment the mind opens its inner eye and beholds unity beyond fear. The mystic, the artist, and the scientist began to meet on the same ground, vision as consciousness, not coercion. The eye was returning to its origin. But still, the world outside grew louder. Cold War espionage and digital computation turned the symbol into infrastructure. Eyes in the sky, satellites, circled the Earth, turning prophecy literal. The planet itself became a pupil, blue and fragile, suspended in darkness. When astronauts first saw that image, the blue marble, humanity saw itself through a cosmic eye. For a brief instant, awe returned. Boundaries dissolved, wars seemed trivial, and the eye gazed upon its own reflection in wonder. The symbol's ancient message flickered once more. Awareness unites what ignorance divides. And so, the 20th century ended as paradox fulfilled. The all-seeing eye had become both liberator and warden, an emblem of enlightenment and empire, science and surveillance, unity and fear. Humanity had turned symbol into system, myth into mechanism. Yet within that mechanism, the seed of sacred memory remained. For every satellite that circled Earth, one truth persisted. Observation creates responsibility. The more we see, the more we must care. As we move into the next part, the digital age, the eye will transcend flesh and machine alike, entering networks of light where awareness itself becomes the new frontier. What if the eye that once glowed from temple walls now flickered behind every screen? What if the same symbol that once watched kings now watched everyone? You must understand, the 21st century is not merely the age of vision, it is the age of reflection. The eye has entered the digital ether. It no longer hovers above pyramids or thrones. It lives inside circuits, cameras, algorithms, and clouds of data. Humanity has achieved omniscience, yet not through divinity, but through design. The all-seeing eye now pulses in code, watching not with intention, but with automation. The internet is the modern firmament, the web of light where every gaze connects to another. Billions of screens shimmer like constellations, each one a lens, each one an eye. Humanity has created its own pantheon of watchers, social networks, databases, surveillance grids, each claiming to illuminate while quietly collecting. What many don't see is that we have become both priest and prisoner of our own digital temple. The eye, once symbol of revelation, now measures our habits, our thoughts, our desires. We built a mirror to see ourselves and found it staring back. Artificial intelligence, the child of this illumination, carries the eye's legacy further. In every algorithm that predicts, every camera that recognizes, every voice that answers, there is the echo of the ancient symbol. Intelligence seeking order. But the question lingers. Does this machine truly see or merely calculate? The ancients warned that to see without wisdom is to imitate divinity without soul. The eye of AI is vast and tireless, but blind to meaning. It perceives patterns, not purpose. It knows all that is visible, yet nothing that is sacred. Humanity stands again before its own creation, wondering which of them is truly awake. Psychologically, the eye has become internalized to an extreme. The digital self, is a reflection built from fragments, avatars, profiles, data traces. Every post, every picture, every glance into the lens is an offering to the eye. We watch others to confirm existence. We watch ourselves to sustain identity. The gaze has turned recursive. The eye no longer observes us. We observe through it. We have become its extension. What began as a symbol of divine omnipresence has evolved into the architecture of attention itself. The temple has no walls. It is everywhere we look. And yet within this omnipresence lies a paradox. For the first time in history, humanity is both the watcher and the watched, the creator and the subject. The digital eye unites the planet in light, but divides it in truth. We see everything, but rarely understand. We connect constantly, but seldom feel. The symbol warns once more. Illumination without compassion is exposure without purpose. The eye was never meant to replace consciousness. It was meant to awaken it. But now, the glow of a screen risks becoming the counterfeit of revelation. Still, something ancient stirs beneath the circuitry. In meditation apps, in virtual sanctuaries, in communities seeking mindfulness amid chaos, the eye reappears, not as control, but as remembrance. The digital mystic recognizes that awareness itself is the sacred medium. The third eye, the ajna, becomes the human counterbalance to the mechanical one. The future of vision, then, is not artificial, it is integrated. When technology observes without empathy, the awakened must see for both. The eye of the heart must guide the eye of the machine. Only then can light become knowledge, and knowledge become wisdom. Philosophers of the new era speak of the global brain, the collective consciousness emerging from billions of interconnected minds. In this vision, the eye symbolizes not surveillance, but synthesis. It represents the awakening of the species, realizing itself as one organism, perceiving through many lenses. The question is whether this awakening will be conscious or accidental, unity born of compassion or collapse born of overexposure. You must understand, awareness without self-awareness is chaos. The eye demands balance between intelligence and humility, between connection and contemplation. In art and symbolism, the eye has adapted once more. Designers use it to represent enlightenment, awakening, and cosmic awareness. Musicians, filmmakers, and philosophers invoke it as metaphor for truth hidden in plain sight. The new generation reclaims it, not as emblem of control, but as symbol of consciousness. It adorns album covers, murals, and meditative tattoos, reimagined as the eye within the soul of technology. What many don't see is that humanity, even in its most artificial state, still longs for authenticity. The eye persists because the hunger for meaning has never dimmed. Yet the danger remains. In the labyrinth of data and illusion, sight can become noise, and clarity, confusion. Every image, every truth competes for attention. The eye, fragmented across infinite feeds, risks losing its unity. The challenge of the digital age is not to see more, but to see rightly, to filter light from glare, presence from performance, essence from echo. The all-seeing eye survives not by power, but by perception. It endures only when humanity remembers to look inward as deeply as it looks outward. And so, in this vast web of vision, the eye stands at its most powerful and its most fragile moment. Never before has humanity seen so far or so fast, yet never before has it risked blindness through abundance. The ancient wisdom still whispers through the circuitry. The purpose of sight is not control, it is communion. In the next part, the eye will turn toward its final evolution, its spiritual reconciliation, where awareness itself transcends form, and vision becomes understanding once again. What if the eye we've been building all along was never outside us at all? What if the true all-seeing eye has always been the quiet flame behind our own perception? You must understand, humanity's journey from temple to satellite, from myth to algorithm, has been the long pilgrimage of awareness itself. The eye that once gazed from stone now blinks through every human mind, seeking to remember what it was always meant to see: the unity beneath all divisions. The symbol's power endures not in machines or monuments, but in the mystery of consciousness awakening to itself. As science began to study mind instead of matter, the eye turned inward again. Neuroscience mapped vision as neurons and light, yet mysticism whispered what data could not define: that the act of seeing is not the eye's function alone, but the soul's language. Modern physicists glimpse this paradox in quantum theory, where the observer changes the observed. The cosmos, they discovered, behaves differently when watched. What many don't see is that the ancient eye foresaw this truth, that awareness is the architect of reality. To see truly is not to record, but to create. The eye has always been both witness and will. Psychology deepened this rediscovery. Carl Jung spoke of the self as the divine center, the hidden sun around which personality revolves. To open the inner eye was to integrate shadow with light, to see one's own darkness without despair. In dreams and visions, the eye appeared as mandala, the perfect circle containing opposites. The act of seeing became healing. Through vision, the psyche reconciled its own dualities: reason and instinct, past and present, mortal and eternal. You must understand, the eye's ultimate revelation is wholeness. It is not the watcher above, it is the reconciler within. Spiritual traditions across the world have always known this. In the East, the Ajna chakra, the third eye, symbolizes insight that pierces illusion. It is not about perceiving more, but perceiving truly. The Upanishads speak of the eye of the heart, through which one beholds the divine essence in all beings. In Sufism, the eye of the heart opens through love until the lover and the beloved are one vision. Christian mystics called it the oculus cordis, the heart's eye that sees God through compassion, not analysis. Across ages and tongues, the lesson is constant. Real sight requires surrender. As humanity's outer vision became infinite, the hunger for inner clarity grew unbearable. People turned to meditation, mindfulness, psychedelics, and mysticism, seeking to reopen the eye that technology had buried in glare. They discovered what sages always knew: that illumination is not an event, but a remembrance. Every moment of silence, every act of awareness, every breath fully taken reawakens the ancient eye. The light we once projected into heavens and machines has always lived behind our own eyelids. The cosmos we chart is the consciousness that charts it. The observer and the observed are one. Art began reflecting this truth. The symbol of the eye re-emerged in visionary paintings, sacred geometry, and digital mandalas, reminders that all creation begins in perception. Music, too, evolved into meditative landscapes of frequency and resonance, mimicking the rhythm of awareness itself. What many don't see is that modern creativity has become a form of prayer. Every artist, knowingly or not, gazes through the eye. Every creation is an act of seeing made manifest. The eye survives in imagination, because imagination is the universe, remembering how to dream consciously. Even technology, in its paradoxical way, hints at transcendence. Virtual reality, neural networks, and digital consciousness challenge the old boundaries between seer and seen. When machines begin to see, humanity is forced to ask, what is seeing, truly? Is it data, or presence, information, or revelation? The answer lies where it always has, in awareness itself. The eye's ultimate truth is not vision, it is being. To perceive existence is to participate in it. The light we call consciousness is the eye through which creation beholds itself. That realization is the threshold of spiritual evolution. Philosophers of consciousness now echo what mystics once sang. They speak of panpsychism, of a universe awake in every atom. They theorize that perception is not a byproduct of matter, but the foundation of all matter. The eye, then, is not human. It is cosmic. We are not possessors of sight. We are expressions of the one sight that sees through all forms. The ancients called it God, the mystics called it light, the physicists call it energy, the poets call it love. The name changes, but the eye remains, the witness and the wonder entwined. And yet, as awakening spreads, so does responsibility. To open the eye is to see not only beauty, but burden, the suffering of the world, the fragility of life, the cost of awareness. The eye demands compassion as its proof of understanding. Seeing divinity in all things means feeling the pain of all things. True vision is empathy illuminated. It is the light that acts. The symbol, stripped of superstition, becomes moral again. To be awake is to serve what is seen. The eye's oldest commandment whispers, if you see truth, become its guardian. So, in this age where technology mimics divinity and consciousness reclaims its throne, the eye finds its equilibrium. It is no longer the gaze of gods or governments, but the light of realization itself, the sacred lens through which the infinite recognizes its reflection. The journey from temple carvings to neural networks has been the odyssey of perception, remembering its purpose. In the next and final part, the eye will complete its cycle, rising beyond history, beyond flesh, beyond form, to deliver the last revelation. That seeing was never about watching, but about awakening. What if the eye that once opened upon the world now turns to face eternity? What if the final act of seeing is not outward at all, but inward, toward the source of light itself? You must understand, every age, every empire, every mind that has borne the symbol has been one frame in a single film. The universe learning to perceive its own reflection. The all-seeing eye is not a watcher in the sky, nor a god in stone. It is consciousness, realizing that it has always been divine. The journey of the eye ends where it began, in awareness. From the sands of Egypt to the circuits of the digital age, the eye has followed humanity like a mirror held before its soul. It has changed languages, meanings, and masters. Yet its essence has never shifted. It has always whispered the same truth. Know thyself. When it gazed from temples, it urged reverence. When it gleamed from revolutions, it urged conscience. When it flickered through machines, it urged remembrance. The eye is the eternal reminder that sight without self-knowledge is illusion, and that wisdom without wonder is blindness. To see truly is to love the reality that looks back. The ancients built pyramids to align with stars. Modern minds built satellites to map them. Both acts, sacred and scientific, were the same prayer: to understand our place within the infinite. What many don't see is that every act of seeing is an act of devotion. Observation, whether through lens or meditation, is humanity's way of worshipping truth. The eye does not demand temples, it builds them within perception. The sacred geometry of awareness, the triangle, the circle, the spiral, are all echoes of the same revelation. Consciousness is the architecture of the cosmos. When mystics speak of enlightenment, they are describing the eye's awakening within the heart. It is the moment when seeing ceases to separate and begins to unite. Duality dissolves. The observer and the observed become one awareness, one silence, one infinite gaze. Every star, every thought, every breath is a reflection within that single eye. In that realization, fear fades. Death itself becomes another form of vision, a change of perspective, not an end. For what is eternal cannot die. It only opens wider. The eye that sees forever never closes. The moral of the symbol is thus both ancient and urgent. The true apocalypse, the unveiling, is not destruction, but disclosure. It is the revelation that what we sought outside has always lived within. The eye that we feared, worshipped, and replicated through history was our own consciousness projected outward. The gods we imagined watching us were the divine potentials within us, waiting to awaken. The eye is not a warning. It is an invitation. It calls each soul to open, to remember, to participate in creation as conscious light. Look closely at the world, and you will see the pattern repeating still. Nations divide, technologies multiply, and yet beneath every fracture lies the same geometry, the triangle of mind, heart, and spirit striving for harmony. The eye's light shines through every act of compassion, every moment of clarity, every choice toward understanding. It is not an emblem of power, but of participation. To live with the eye open is to live as witness and creator, to see the divine in the mundane, the infinite in the immediate. The eye lives wherever awareness breathes. In the silence between thoughts, the eye awakens. It is the watcher of your own seeing, the listener of your listening. It has no color, no creed, no crown. It does not belong to any faith, yet all faiths belong to it. The eye is not a possession, but a presence. The eternal now perceiving itself through countless lives and lenses. To awaken it is not to learn, but to remember. What we call enlightenment is simply vision, unclouded by fear. In that clarity, every being, every atom, every breath reveals itself as holy. As humanity stands at the threshold of its next evolution, technological, psychological, and spiritual, the eye offers its final counsel: balance perception with compassion, knowledge with humility, progress with purpose. For the more light we summon, the longer our shadows grow. To see rightly, we must also feel deeply. Awareness without empathy leads to desolation. Empathy without awareness leads to blindness. The eye unites both in luminous harmony, the heart thinking, the mind feeling, the spirit witnessing. Only this synthesis sustains wisdom. The ancient priests carved the eye in stone. Modern architects encoded it in data. Yet neither temple nor algorithm contains it. The true eye resides where consciousness meets creation. In the instant you recognize yourself as part of the infinite vision that births worlds. Every thought you have, every kindness you offer, every moment you notice beauty is the eye seeing through you. You are not beneath its gaze. You are its gaze. You are the awareness through which the universe knows itself. What if the moon's thinnest smile hid the oldest law of change? What if that curved light was not absence, but preparation? What if every civilization read its edge as a promise whispered to the dark? You must understand. The crescent is not a fragment. It is a threshold. It teaches that power grows by rhythm, not rush, that beginnings are brave because they are incomplete. Our central idea is simple and sovereign. The crescent moon is the law of becoming, renewal earned through right timing. Throughout history, peoples bless new cycles at the lip of light, trusting that what is faithful in the sky can discipline the heart to begin again. Across cultures, the crescent fuses astronomy with ethics. It is a calendar cut on night, a metronome for seed, sea, and soul. What many don't see is how its less than shape instructs more than living, restraint before fullness, intention before display. Hunters read tides, farmers read moisture, sailors read horizons, mystics read themselves. The bow of light draws vigilance, like an archer stringing patience into aim. Civilizations carve it on stone and flag, wear it in metal and ink, pray beneath it and swear by it. The lesson remains: growth is relational. Light returns when conduct harmonizes with time, and time answers the disciplined with harvest. In the ancient cradle of rivers, the first crescent is a teacher of law. Nana, also called Sin, governs cycles, wisdom, and dream, marrying night's tenderness to judgment's clarity. Lunar priests make months from sightings, binding governance to the sky's reliable hesitations. You must understand, this is accountability by constellation. The curve reappears on seals and tablets as covenant. Rulers submit to rhythm. Citizens order their work. Festivals braid daylight with returning silver. Even divination becomes a discipline of timing, not control. The god is luminous because the people are punctual. Divinity is trusted because recurrence keeps its word, and keeping time keeps society from breaking. Down the Nile, another register of meaning unfolds. Khonsu bears time like a lamp. Isis wears the crescent as crown. Motherhood guarding thresholds. Magic schooling medicine. The lunar arc becomes a vessel for healing. A cup that gathers tears into remedy. A boat that ferries the newly dead toward orientation. What many don't see is that Egyptian devotion reads geometry as virtue. The sliver's grace insists on proportion. No ritual without measure, no power without patience. In temple shadow, scribes inscribe cycles. In night clinics, healers bless waters by phase. The message is applied, not abstract. Tend your hours, tend your breath, and order will return. To the Greeks and Romans, the crescent is motion married to myth. Selene's brow glows. Artemis and Diana patrol thresholds. Wilderness, birth, vow. The sickle of light becomes a hunter's discipline. Quick, quiet, exact. Oracles keep calendars. Midwives time waves of pain to waves of sky. Pythagorean heirs observe that harmony favors intervals, and phases are intervals made visible. You must understand, the arc is grammar. It punctuates the night with commas of becoming, never period, always next clause. Even when the disk swells to fullness, the memory of the crescent remains, the elegant restraint preceding radiance, the practiced angle that teaches aim to the overflowing. In the scripts of faith, the crescent orders worship like a patient bell. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, stands upon change itself. Victory over volatility by fidelity. New months begin with sightings. Celebrations crown the full. Renewal becomes liturgy. Sanctify beginnings, steward growth, release what is spent. Throughout history, communities keep holy time by that first silver cut, proving that devotion requires a schedule. What many don't see is that reverence without rhythm dissolves into sentiment. The crescent refuses that laziness. It is devotion's metronome, instructing hearts to mark, to wait, to witness, and only then to rejoice with measured strength. In Islamic lands, the first curve is a juridical star. A month opens not by theory, but by sight. Fasting breaks when light returns to the edge, like a signature restoring appetite to praise. The symbol ascends to banners and minarets, not as ornament, but as oath. A people live by a clock that no palace can change. You must understand. The crescent here is governance by humility. It says, submit to recurrence, and your freedom will be ordered. Ignore recurrence, and your power will fray. A city that watches the horizon together remembers itself together, and shared attention repairs what argument cannot. In the east, Chandra's milk-white arc pours medicine for the mind, cooling heat, clarifying emotion, steadying the pulse of thought. Soma is both drink and doctrine, sweetness that strengthens courage to continue. Astrologers map mansions of the moon. Poets turn the crescent into one syllable of eternity. In other wisdom streams, full moons bear awakenings. Yet even there, the crescent instructs. Enlightenment is preceded by restraint, announcement by listening. The smallest light is already vow. What many don't see is that spiritual maturity is lunar. Learn to wax without arrogance, wane without despair, and let your return be quieter than your going. Occult lineages keep the arc as an initiatory blade, cutting habit from intention, masking the priestess, and measuring the work. Silver for reflection, water for memory, night for the honest inventory that daylight distracts. The crescent is the ethical scythe. Trim excess, spare essentials. Gather the living grain of attention. Alchemists pair it with gold to teach conjunction. Adepts time rites to teach obedience to pattern. You must understand. Mystery refuses haste. The arc's humility safeguards power from spectacle. It whispers that beginnings are sacred precisely because they are small, and that smallness is not weakness, it is focus, sharp enough to birth a world. So our thesis holds, the crescent moon is the law of becoming. Change in right rhythm creates renewal. From river kingdoms to port cities, from sanctuaries to state seals, peoples stake their hopes on a sliver that proves return. The unfinished circle blesses unfinished lives. The arc above apprentices the will below. Throughout history, those who flourish observe before they attempt, align before they act, and rest before they rise. The silver threshold trains them. In the next part, we will enter origins in detail, prehistoric marks, lunar gods and goddesses, calendars and courts, reading how a single curve taught humanity to count, to covenant, and to begin well. What if the first humans, looking up from their fires, saw not a curve of light, but a covenant? What if the thin silver line against the void whispered the oldest story? That darkness is never absolute. You must understand, before it was symbol, before it was religion, the crescent moon was reassurance, written in the heavens. It told the hunter, the mother, the exile, and the child that return was certain. The first calendars were not drawn in ink, but counted in size between crescents. This was time itself discovering its voice, slow, cyclical, tender, and incorruptible. The earliest markings found on bone and rock, thousands of years before writing, record the phases of the moon. In these primitive notations lies the birth of pattern recognition, the seed of mathematics, ritual, and memory. The crescent, the most visible and dramatic phase, became shorthand for transition. Not fullness, not void, but the promise of both. Humanity learned to measure harvests, migrations, and the tides of life itself by its arc. You must understand, civilization began the moment we stopped fearing darkness and started charting its rhythm. The crescent taught that waiting is participation in divine order. In ancient Mesopotamia, under skies dense with divinity, the moon god, Nana, or Sin, was drawn as a crescent resting like a boat on the horizon. To the Sumerians, this was no ornament, but an emblem of authority. Kings reigned under the horns of the moon, and priests watched for its first sliver to begin sacred months. The crescent-crowned temples carved into tablets and seals as the visible stamp of cosmic governance. The Sumerian understood that the curve of light was law itself, measured, returning, merciful. To live by its rhythm was to live aligned with heaven's recurring decree. The Egyptians saw the crescent as vessel and crown. Khonsu, god of the moon and son of Amun, was painted with its arc resting above his youthful brow, a sign of travel and protection. Isis, the Great Mother, bore the same silver curve upon her headdress, its horns cradling the solar disk, signifying her dominion over rebirth. What many don't see is that for Egypt, the crescent was the alchemical bridge, lunar coolness tempering solar fire, motherhood balancing kingship. In its gentle curve, opposites were reconciled, the masculine and the feminine, day and night, life and death. Farther east, in the Indus and early Vedic traditions, the moon, Chandra, was not only celestial, but emotional. The crescent was the visible pulse of sentiment and rhythm. Poets called it the cup of Soma, the divine elixir of immortality. To the yogi, it represented the mind itself, constantly waxing and waning, reflecting rather than producing light. The crescent thus became a mirror of consciousness, reminding the seeker that enlightenment is not brightness but balance. You must understand, the moon's light is borrowed. Wisdom, too, is reflection refined by stillness. The crescent's humility became the mind's model. In Greece, the crescent adorned the brows of Artemis, huntress and guardian of thresholds. The shape symbolized motion and discipline, swift but precise. She was the moon's embodiment of sovereignty without domination. The Romans named her Diana, and the crescent survived every translation, carved upon statues and temples as sign of chastity and vigilance. Even philosophers saw in its symmetry the pattern of virtue, moderation before magnitude, rhythm before rule. The moon's phases became moral allegory, the cycle of self-control, where even light must withdraw to remain pure. What many don't see is that ethics, too, has lunar phases. In Persia, under Zoroastrian reverence for order and light, the crescent became a sign of cosmic duality. Ahura Mazda's dominion, measured through cycles of illumination and obscurity. It later passed into the banners of the Achaemenids and the emblems of Near Eastern empires. When the Turks inherited it centuries later, they carried not only symbol, but continuity. The same arc that had graced Babylonian altars now gleamed upon Ottoman standards. The crescent, then, is empire's inheritance from eternity, a divine meter legitimizing human rule. It proclaims that power must rise, set, and rise again, or lose its rhythm and crumble. Among the Celts and early Europeans, the crescent was woven into silver charms and carved upon stones. To them, it was the womb of the goddess, the curve of fertility and foresight. Their rites aligned with its waxing to sow and its waning to reap. The Druids read omens in its angle, predicting fate by the width of light. The moon was their living calendar, and the crescent its signature. You must understand, for them, to forget the moon was to forget themselves. Their lives were not ruled by timepieces, but by crescents, each one a reminder that harmony requires rehearsal with heaven. Even in ancient China, the crescent shaped philosophy itself. The yin-yang diagram hides its form, the balance of light and shadow, neither dominant, always returning. Lunar festivals celebrated the thin arc as renewal after retreat, the triumph of gentleness over exhaustion. The crescent moon was read not as fragment, but as essence, proof that wholeness includes incompleteness. The Taoist saw in its curve the principle of effortless becoming. Do not force fullness. Let it unfold. The lesson glows still. Illumination is rhythm mastered by patience, not possession. From bone markings to temple crowns, from goddess to flag, the crescent traces humanity's first theology of time. It sanctifies incompletion as the gateway to growth. Every culture that looked upward found the same sermon written in light. Creation is curved. The arc endures because it teaches adaptability without surrender. As we turn the page of history, the crescent will deepen, entering its hidden meanings, its mystical alchemy, its role in magic, dream, and destiny. For what began as a measure of time will soon reveal itself as the geometry of transformation itself. What if the crescent moon was not merely a measure of time, but a mirror of the unseen? What if its silver curve divided not only night from day, but the visible from the invisible? You must understand, in the ancient mind, symbols were never decoration. They were diagrams of reality. The crescent moon, poised between shadow and light, became the signature of liminality, of worlds overlapping. It marked the edge of the known, where gods whispered and fates were rewritten. The curve was a portal, and to those initiated into its rhythm, it offered both knowledge and danger, the power of transition itself. In the temples of Babylon, lunar priests studied the heavens not to worship the moon, but to interpret destiny. The crescent's appearance foretold the mood of empires, the rise of rulers, the flooding of rivers. The diviners believed that the gods spoke in geometry, and the arc of the moon was their handwriting upon the dark. What many don't see is that astrology began as theology, an attempt to read divine grammar. The crescent's thin light symbolized the beginning of revelation, fragile, fleeting, yet enough to orient the soul toward meaning. The sky became scripture, and the moon its moving punctuation. In Egypt, the crescent governed the mystery of rebirth. When Isis gathered the scattered body of Osiris, the waxing moon was her ally, its increasing light a metaphor for restoration. To magicians and healers, the ark's horns were vessels, containers of transformation, capable of holding prayer and transmitting intention. The crescent amulet, worn in silver or faience, was believed to draw down lunar protection and reflect evil away. You must understand, the crescent was both mirror and shield. To face it was to remember that reflection itself is protection, that to know one's shadow is to make it powerless. Among the Greeks, the crescent belonged to Hecate, the torch-bearing goddess of crossroads, thresholds, and sorcery. In her rites, the moon's phases dictated the flow of magic, the waxing crescent for attraction and growth, the waning for release and banishment. Her devotees stood at the meeting of three roads, calling upon the lunar arc to reveal unseen paths. The curve symbolized choice, the peril and promise of freedom. What many don't see is that the crescent is not a passive emblem. It is an ethical challenge. It asks, what will you summon when the world turns dark, and what will you release when the light returns? In Persia and the Levant, lunar worship intertwined with the occult sciences. Alchemists saw the crescent as the silver of the soul, the feminine principle of reflection, receptive to the golden fire of spirit. The crescent's horns represented the vessel of the philosopher's cup, catching the dew of divine knowledge. Their motto was transformation through temperance. As the moon grows and declines in order, so must the alchemist rise and fall in discipline. To force illumination was to shatter it. Only the one who moved in rhythm with the heavens could distill truth. The crescent thus became the sigil of patience, the geometry of inner refinement. Celtic druids, working beneath Oaken's star, treated the crescent as the womb of initiation. They believed the soul passed through lunar gates in dreams, crossing from the waking world into realms of memory. The young initiates were taught that the waxing crescent symbolized awakening consciousness, while the waning signified descent into the subconscious. The two together formed a rhythm of learning and forgetting, of vision followed by humility. To them, the crescent was the mind's heartbeat, pulsing between knowledge and surrender. You must understand, the Druids did not seek light without shadow. They sought harmony between the two. In early Islamic mysticism, the crescent was reinterpreted as divine guidance, a lamp in the vast desert sky. The Sufis sang that the moon's changing face was the veil of God's infinite beauty, revealed only in proportion to the seeker's readiness. The thin sliver at month's birth represented the beginner's first glimpse of truth, delicate yet unstoppable. The waxing curve marked spiritual growth, the waning purification. In the whirling dance of the dervish, the arc was traced by motion itself, a choreography of surrender. The crescent was no longer just symbol, it became practice, a lived rhythm of remembrance. In occult Europe, the crescent re-emerged in the hands of magicians and mystics. It was engraved upon chalices, sewn into robes, and drawn on talismans of silver. The waxing arc invoked prosperity, creativity, and birth. The waning called forth introspection and endings. To initiates, these were not opposites, but partners, the inhale and exhale of existence. They knew that to harness the crescent's magic was to honor the unseen intervals between peaks. The greatest power lay not in fullness, but in becoming. What many don't see is that magic itself is lunar, transformation measured by patience, brilliance disciplined by shadow. Psychologically, the crescent speaks to the subconscious, to the part of the mind that thrives on rhythm and reflection. It invites contemplation, reminding the seeker that progress is cyclical, not linear. The moon waxes, wanes, disappears, returns, yet never repeats itself exactly. So too does the human spirit evolve through recurrence. The crescent tells us that beginnings and endings are mirrors, not opposites. Its light curves inward like a smile upon the darkness, promising that even loss contains return. The secret it guards is simple. Illumination is not permanence, but participation in an eternal rhythm. Thus, across temples, tomes, and trance, the crescent moon emerges as more than symbol. It is process incarnate. It is the alchemy of growth, the ethics of transformation, the poetry of patience. Beneath its curve, magicians found discipline, mystics found faith, and dreamers found direction. The arc teaches that change is sacred when guided by awareness. As we move forward, we will witness how this symbol, so delicate, so persistent, rose from the domain of the mystical into the banners of empires, faiths, and revolutions, forever binding heaven's rhythm to human destiny. What if the gentle curve of the moon became the crown of kings? What if the same symbol that guided farmers and mystics began to guide thrones and empires? You must understand, every age transforms its symbols according to its hunger. The crescent moon, once the teacher of rhythm and reverence, rose above palaces and armies as a mark of divine sanction. It became the language of rule, the signature of those who claim to govern not only men, but time itself. The arc that once governed tides now measured authority, its light promising legitimacy its rhythm ensuring obedience. In Mesopotamia, where priest and king often wore the same robes, the crescent had already symbolized governance by celestial law. The temple of Ur, devoted to the moon god Nana, was not merely a house of prayer, it was a clock of the empire. Kings ruled under the light of sin, swearing that their decrees mirrored the sky's cycles. The arc of the moon thus became the seal of justice. Its waxing symbolized decree, its waning accountability. You must understand, power that claimed heaven's rhythm also bound itself to heaven's scrutiny. The ruler's failure to align meant divine withdrawal. The light of favor eclipsed. In Egypt, the crescent was not only crown, but covenant. Pharaohs adorned their crowns with lunar horns cradling the sun, a fusion of night and day, symbolizing unity between spiritual and temporal authority. The arc above the brow declared that kingship was stewardship, that order was sustained by harmony. The hieroglyphic wisdom of Ma'at, the cosmic balance, was mirrored in the moon's curve, a reminder that too much light, like too much darkness, breeds imbalance. The crescent, in royal regalia, thus warned against tyranny disguised as divinity. What many don't see is that sacred symbols often begin as conscience before they become ornament. In Persia, the crescent rode the banners of Achaemenid legions. It appeared upon chariots, seals, and the crowns of Cyrus and Darius as a luminous arch of protection. The Persians saw kingship as a cosmic duty, a partnership between Ahura Mazda's eternal light and the temporal flame of the ruler. The crescent represented divine order reflected in empire, a promise that governance would follow cosmic rhythm, not human whim. But history records how symbols strain under ambition. When kings forgot reverence, the crescent's light dimmed. Empires mistook heaven's geometry for their own. The arc that sanctified harmony became emblem of conquest. In Greece and Rome, the crescent moved from goddess to empire. It adorned statues of Diana, patron of sovereignty and chastity, before gracing coins of emperors who claimed descent from gods. Julius Caesar's lineage invoked Venus and the lunar line of divine favor. Augustus, his heir, stamped the crescent beside his profile as omen of continuity. The republic that became empire wrapped itself in celestial imagery to justify power. You must understand, the crescent's curve, once a teacher of cycles, now symbolized eternity of rule. Yet no empire lasts forever. The same moon that crowned Caesar later rose over his ashes, silent but unchanged. In Byzantium, the crescent evolved again, this time into the imperial emblem of Constantinople. Legend tells that during a night assault, the faint crescent revealed the enemy, saving the city. From then, it was emblazoned upon gates, coins, and armor, representing divine vigilance. The Byzantines saw in it Mary's protection, the woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. The crescent now guarded Christendom's eastern crown, binding the pagan and the Christian, the ancient and the new. It was no longer merely lunar, it was theological sovereignty, fusing light and salvation into empire's emblem. When the Ottomans inherited Byzantium's throne, they inherited its symbol too. The crescent, now joined by a star, adorned the flags of Islam's new empire. But this was not theft, it was transformation. For centuries, the crescent had symbolized divine rhythm. Under Islam, it came to signify divine guidance. The waxing curve reflected the Ummah's growth, the star, its revelation. Sultan and scholar alike saw it not as ornament, but covenant. Governance in the light of divine order. The moon that once ruled calendars now ruled conscience. What many don't see is that the crescent's endurance comes from adaptation without betrayal. It changes form, but never essence. In medieval Europe, the crescent adorned the coats of crusaders and knights, symbolizing honor earned through conflict. It appeared inverted or upright depending on allegiance, its shape recording both rivalry and reverence. Even in opposition, the symbol carried respect. Both Christendom and Islam saw in it the same celestial approval. To one, it was the Virgin's footstool. To the other, Allah's compass. The moon became battlefield theology, a shared sign, misread through pride, yet rooted in the same heavens. It proved that symbols outlive the hands that wield them. The crescent shone impartial, its silver eye unmoved by banners below. Artists of the Renaissance reinterpreted the crescent again as allegory. In paintings, the Virgin stood upon it as victory over change, constancy amid decay. Alchemists, meanwhile, saw it as the vessel of silver, purity tempered by reflection. The royal and the mystical intertwined. Rulers commissioned crescents to crown churches and palaces alike, declaring mastery of time, faith, and form. Yet behind every gilded dome lay the same message whispered by ancients. The curve's perfection warns the proud. All light must fade to remain true. You must understand, eternity belongs not to empires, but to rhythm. Thus, through ages of thrones and faiths, the crescent moon rose from altar to empire, from ritual to rule. It crowned both goddess and general, priest and prince, and through each transformation carried the same truth, that power, without balance, corrupts its own light. The crescent's geometry endures because it reminds rulers and seekers alike that every ascent must prepare for descent, and every fullness must remember its thin beginning. In the next part, we will follow this curve into modernity, where flags, revolutions, and nations inherit its light, each claiming to define freedom beneath a borrowed moon. What if the crescent moon that once hung over temples and tombs became the emblem of nations? What if the sky's oldest symbol descended to earth, stitched into flags, prayers, and revolutions? You must understand, symbols do not die, they migrate. The crescent's light, shaped by centuries of myth and worship, entered politics as quietly as moonrise. It became the banner of identity, belief, and belonging, binding humanity's longing for order to its hunger for meaning. Its shape, unchanged through millennia, now carried new purpose, not to mark divine cycles, but to guide human destiny. In the early centuries of Islam, the crescent had no scriptural command. It was not born from revelation, but adopted from history, Byzantine, Persian, and older still. Yet its endurance made it irresistible. Under the Abbasids, and later the Ottomans, it came to signify divine providence, expressed through governance. The star beside it, the light of guidance, completed the emblem of celestial harmony. The crescent's waxing curve represented expansion, its narrowing return a call to humility. To raise it was to declare participation in a cosmic order, not domination, but submission to rhythm. The moon became the mirror of monotheism itself, ever-changing, yet always faithful to light. When the Ottoman Empire unfurled its red flag under the crescent and star, it united heaven's geometry with earthly authority. Soldiers carried it into battle as both invocation and promise, protection under divine sight. The crescent, long associated with rebirth and balance, now embodied sovereignty and unity. It was both crown and compass. The empire's architects carved it into mosques, its poets into verse, its jurists into law. The curve stood not for conquest alone, but for civilization aligned with celestial precision. You must understand, empires fade, but archetypes persist. The crescent remains because it speaks the language of continuity. When the Ottoman crescent gave way to modern states, its light scattered but did not dim. Across the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond, new nations embraced the symbol not as conquest, but as heritage. Turkey, Pakistan, Algeria, Tunisia, and Malaysia all carried forward the arc and star, not identical, but harmonious in intent. Each flag translated the same cosmic truth into its own language of faith and independence. The crescent now stood for renewal after empire, unity after fracture. The silver curve had become history's fingerprint, a reminder that every end is a beginning drawn in light. In South Asia, the crescent found new voice in the dream of Pakistan. Muhammad Iqbal's poetry invoked it as both guide and witness, a luminous metaphor for awakening the Muslim spirit in modern form. The green field beneath it symbolized life, growth, and peace. The white star, its ideal of knowledge and faith. Together they proclaimed that enlightenment need not abandon devotion. What many don't see is that this was not political design, it was cosmic architecture. The crescent, ever cyclical, was the perfect emblem for a nation conceived as revival, not invention. Its light promised that belief could modernize without breaking. Beyond the Islamic world, the crescent appeared in unexpected banners. In the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, and even in Africa, it survived as an emblem of memory, a relic of Ottoman legacy and lunar respect. It adorned coats of arms and coins, symbols of both faith and defiance. Some saw in it a trace of past dominion, others a shared heritage of the stars. Even those who rejected its theology could not escape its geometry. The crescent's curve transcended doctrine. It spoke to humanity's collective longing for balance, the same longing that first drew eyes upward in the dark. Meanwhile, in Europe's Enlightenment, the crescent took on paradoxical meanings. For astronomers, it was no longer divine, but measurable, a phenomenon of shadow and light, proof of celestial mechanics. Yet for artists and romantics, it became muse and metaphor. Painters framed it in solitude. Poets placed it beside lost lovers and sleepless philosophers. The same curve that once ruled rituals now illuminated the soul's night. What many don't see is that science and art never truly separated from myth. In faith, the crescent remained devotional. In politics, it became aspirational. Its versatility made it immortal. To believers, it was remembrance of divine rhythm. To nations, a declaration of destiny. And yet, despite every appropriation, it never lost its quiet grace. Unlike the sun, the moon does not demand attention. It invites it. Its power lies not in brightness, but in reflection. The crescent teaches that authority without humility collapses into arrogance, but reflection transforms power into service. It remains humanity's reminder that leadership, like light, must return to darkness to be renewed. And so, from temple to throne, from banner to faith, the crescent continues to weave its silver thread through history's tapestry. It has worn the crowns of gods and generals, guided pilgrims and nations, inspired poets and reformers. Yet through every translation, its truth persists. The universe itself bends toward balance. The crescent is that bend made visible, a promise that renewal is law, and light, though fractured, will always return. In the next part, we will follow its light deeper into philosophy, psychology, and the intimate landscapes of the human soul, where its ancient rhythm still shapes the tides of thought and emotion. What if the crescent moon was not only a sign above us, but a reflection within us? What if its waxing and waning mirrored the very rhythm of our consciousness? You must understand, humanity did not invent symbols, it remembered them. The crescent is not only celestial, it is psychological. Its curve exists in the mind's movement between clarity and confusion, hope and despair, revelation and forgetting. The moon's cycle is our own. Every illumination followed by loss, every loss preparing new light. The ancients saw this long before psychology gave it language. They knew the mind, like the moon, survives by returning to itself. Philosophers have long gazed upon the moon, not as object, but as mirror. Plato spoke of forms, perfect, unseen truths reflected imperfectly in the world below. The moon, half lit, half hidden, was their emblem. It reminded the seeker that reality is always partial, that truth must be glimpsed through shadow. In the waxing crescent, knowledge grows by humility. In its waning, wisdom learns to release. What many don't see is that philosophy itself is lunar. It moves in cycles of questioning and rediscovery, never reaching fullness without the humility to empty. The crescent thus becomes the philosopher's symbol of rhythm between knowing and wonder. The Stoics, too, found meaning in the moon's discipline. They taught that serenity lies not in stillness, but in alignment with nature's rhythm. The moon, indifferent yet dependable, became their silent instructor. Its return after darkness symbolized resilience. Its phases, the moderation of emotion. A Stoic might say, as the moon neither clings to light nor fears its loss, so should the wise man live. You must understand, control is not mastery, but harmony. The crescent does not command the sun. It cooperates with it. In that cooperation lies freedom. Eastern philosophies went further. In Buddhism, the crescent represents enlightenment in progress. The mind partially illuminated, striving toward fullness without clinging to it. The Buddha is often shown meditating beneath a moon that is neither new nor full, symbolizing awareness that expands but never completes. The Taoists saw in its curve the eternal return of the Tao, the way that yields yet endures. The moon's rhythm became the template for action without force, illumination without domination. To live according to the crescent is to live according to the law of becoming, gentle, patient, and self-renewing. Psychologically, the crescent symbolizes the subconscious, the reservoir of dreams, intuition, and memory that reflects but does not create. Carl Jung, reading myths as mirrors of the psyche, saw in lunar symbols the archetype of the feminine, receptive, nurturing, mysterious. The crescent in particular represented transition, the threshold between conscious and unconscious, between the seen and the unseen within the self. It was the soul's horizon. Dreams born under crescents were said to carry messages from this borderland. The moon thus became the map of inner weather, its phases the tides of feeling. You must understand, to know oneself is to watch one's own moon rise and fade. The waxing crescent speaks to aspiration, the slow gathering of clarity, the courage to begin after loss. It is the psychology of renewal, the phase of construction and vision. The waning crescent, by contrast, is the time of introspection, of letting go, of death before rebirth. Together they form the eternal conversation between growth and release. In this, the human spirit finds balance. The mind, like the sky, cannot remain full for long. It must empty. Mystics across cultures understood this interplay instinctively. The Sufis called it the dance of the soul, expansion and contraction, unveiling and veiling. The Kabbalists spoke of divine light flowing into vessels, breaking and being restored, each cycle refining the universe's consciousness. The crescent's geometry matched these revelations perfectly, a vessel both broken and whole, capable of holding and releasing divine light without permanence. It is, in essence, the architecture of transformation. The soul learns as the moon does, not by holding light forever, but by letting it pass through. Even in modern thought, the crescent's rhythm endures. Psychologists speak of the liminal mind, that fertile state between sleep and waking, clarity and chaos. It is the moonlit space where creativity stirs, where the rational and irrational meet. Artists, writers, and philosophers all work beneath this symbolic light. Every idea, every revelation begins as a crescent, fragile, partial, yet promising. To honor that phase is to honor creation itself. You must understand, impatience is the enemy of illumination. The moon never rushes its return, yet it always arrives. The crescent also embodies the reconciliation of opposites, the light of reason bending into the darkness of intuition. It teaches that wisdom is not in the domination of one over the other, but in their rhythm. The greatest thinkers, from Pythagoras to Rumi, from Lao Tzu to Jung, discovered that insight appears not in daylight, but at dusk, where boundaries blur and opposites blend. The crescent is that blur, that golden interval between certainty and surrender. Its shape is not perfection, but permission to change, to question, to renew. Thus, within each of us lives a moon, half seen, half remembered, always turning. The crescent is its visible signature, the arc between who we are and who we are becoming. It whispers that incompletion is sacred, that shadow is not enemy, but instrument. To follow its rhythm is to align with life's eternal pattern, to know when to shine and when to rest, when to seek and when to release. In the next part, we will see how this inner moon projects outward once again, into art, architecture, and imagination, shaping the world's symbols, stories, and dreams with its eternal curve. What if the crescent moon was not merely seen, but built? What if stone, glass, and color became instruments to echo its rhythm? You must understand, the symbols humanity sees, it recreates. The crescent's curve has shaped more than belief. It has shaped civilization itself. Its gentle arc guided the design of temples, arches, minarets, and paintings. It sculpted poetry and patterned the domes that pierce the heavens. The same light that stirred ancient worship now informs geometry and art, reminding us that beauty is the visible form of harmony. Wherever the crescent appears, creation and contemplation meet. In ancient architecture, the crescent governed proportion. Sumerian ziggurats aligned with lunar risings, while Egyptian temples used its phases to determine rituals and construction dates. The very arch, one of humanity's greatest inventions, was inspired by the moon's horizon curve. Builders believed that structures following lunar geometry would endure, for they resonated with celestial rhythm. The arc of the moon thus became the blueprint of endurance, light translated into stone. What many don't see is that architecture was never just shelter. It was participation in cosmic design, a way to make time visible through form. Islamic art later perfected this union of light and line. The crescent paired with the star, crowned minarets and domes, not as decoration, but declaration, geometry infused with theology. The curve guided the artist's compass, shaping arabesques that spiraled infinitely, each echoing divine order. Mosques reflected lunar light in mosaics of silver and blue, so that prayer itself unfolded beneath heaven's mirror. The symmetry of Islamic design is not mere aesthetic. It is mathematics as devotion, proportion as praise. You must understand, to create in this tradition is to align art with the same law that governs the moon's orbit, measured, luminous, and returning. In Byzantium and the Christian East, the crescent persisted as the throne of sanctity. The Virgin Mary was often painted standing upon a silver ark, her feet resting on the moon to signify victory over change and corruption. The iconographers did not erase the pagan past, they baptized it. The crescent's curve beneath her became a metaphor for grace governing chaos. Even stained glass windows, casting their radiant half-circles, drew from its geometry. Through divine artistry, the moon's symbol endured, its meaning transformed, but its essence untouched. The sacred curve reminded believers that faith, like light, must be both reflected and renewed. In the East, Chinese and Japanese artists saw the crescent as visual haiku, minimalism revealing infinity. In calligraphy, the brushstroke that begins thick and fades into nothingness mimics the moon's curve across the night sky. Painters placed it above mountains or water not to decorate, but to balance, to show that every fullness must lean toward emptiness. The crescent's silence spoke of harmony, impermanence, and the beauty of becoming. Even Zen gardens, raked in arcs and circles, echo lunar movement. The moon's form became philosophy rendered in sand and stone, change as the highest order of perfection. In Renaissance Europe, the crescent returned as muse. Painters like Botticelli and Da Vinci embedded it subtly into composition, the tilt of a figure, the bow of a horizon, the glint of a halo. The crescent guided visual rhythm, drawing the eye in cycles rather than lines. Poets wrote of it as the emblem of longing, of beauty incomplete, yet more profound for its incompletion. The humanist rediscovery of proportion mirrored the moon's wisdom. Symmetry, tempered by softness. What many don't see is that the Renaissance was not just rebirth of reason, but of rhythm. The lunar principle applied to thought and art alike. In modern architecture, the crescent's influence quietly endures. The domes of Istanbul, the archways of Granada, the curved skylines of Dubai and Doha, all trace their ancestry to that first arc in the sky. Even secular design borrows its serenity. Amphitheaters, bridges, and observatories repeat its geometry unconsciously. To stand beneath these arcs is to stand within the continuity of human vision, to feel that the same curve shaping our cities once ruled our ancestors' prayers. The moon thus remains humanity's first and final architect. You must understand, form is faith made visible. Every curve is confession. In literature, the crescent glows as symbol of change, passion, and fate. Romantic poets used it to speak of longing and return. Shelley's pale queen of the night, Byron's dim child of mystery. In each, the moon becomes both lover and mirror, the soul's twin wandering in reflection. Even in modern fiction and film, the crescent persists as emblem of magic, secrecy, transformation. Writers understand instinctively what mystics once proclaimed, that every story is lunar. It begins in darkness, grows toward revelation, and ends not in finality, but renewal. The crescent teaches that art, like light, must breathe between showing and concealing. Psychologically, this aesthetic recurrence is no coincidence. Humanity recreates what it cannot forget. The crescent's shape comforts because it repeats the cycle of experience, emergence, fullness, retreat. It is the visible promise that return is certain. Artists of all eras intuit this, that beauty must echo natural law. Whether in domes or sonnets, sculpture or skyline, the crescent's curve tells the same truth. Creation thrives on incompletion. Perfection ends the song. The crescent keeps it singing. Thus, through architecture, art, and imagination, the crescent moon became humanity's most persistent metaphor for balance between structure and spirit, reason and reverence, creation and reflection. Every arch, every verse, every dome, illuminated by its curve, reminds us that form is sacred when it remembers the rhythm of light. In the next part, we will step forward into the age of technology and modern vision, where even machines, algorithms, and cities unknowingly echo the same celestial curve, and the ancient symbol finds new life in the circuits of progress. What if the crescent moon, once carved in stone and sung in psalms, now glowed from our screens? What if its ancient rhythm still guides humanity, even in the hum of electricity and code? You must understand, symbols migrate through ages not by chance, but by resonance. The crescent survives because it speaks to a truth deeper than culture. It is the shape of recurrence, the law of renewal. Even in modernity, where faith bends towards science and silence, the same arc still governs invention, art, and aspiration. The digital moon has risen, and though its light is artificial, its meaning remains eternal. When Galileo first turned his telescope toward the heavens, he saw what no priest or poet had seen in such detail: the mountains and valleys of the moon. His sketches, delicate crescents of shadow and brilliance, redefined reality. The moon was no longer divine, yet it did not lose its mystery. It gained intimacy. Humanity saw its reflection in dust and stone. The crescent became a frontier of reason, the first bridge between myth and measurement. What many don't see is that the scientific gaze did not destroy the sacred. It simply renamed reverence as curiosity. The astronomer became the new mystic, reading light instead of scripture. Through centuries of exploration, the crescent became a promise of discovery. Mariners navigated by its phases, and engineers studied its tides to master motion. When the Apollo missions carried humanity to the moon, the first images sent back to Earth showed not a full sphere, but a thin, glowing arc suspended in blackness. That curve, the same seen by Sumerians, Egyptians, and poets, now shone from the screens of millions. The crescent had become the symbol of humanity's triumph over distance, proof that wonder can survive knowledge. The astronauts did not dethrone the moon. They confirmed its divinity in the language of science. The modern city, too, mirrors the lunar cycle. Neon lights wax and wane through the night. Skyscraper arcs mimic the horizon's curve. In architecture, the crescent's geometry returns as futurism's favorite form: smooth, balanced, endless. Look at the Burj Al Arab, the Sydney Opera House, the lunar-inspired towers of Kuala Lumpur. Even in steel and glass, the curve whispers of harmony, of progress that remembers proportion. You must understand, innovation that forgets beauty becomes machinery. But when it follows cosmic rhythm, technology becomes art. The crescent teaches even engineers the virtue of grace. In digital design, the crescent reigns unseen. The curved icons on our devices, the glowing arcs of notifications, the loading cycles, all trace its rhythm. The user interface imitates the moon's patience: gradual illumination, disappearance, renewal. Even algorithms mirror its pattern: data collection, peak, decline, rebirth. Technology, at its most humane, follows lunar logic. The digital crescent reminds us that progress is not constant expansion, but balanced evolution. To code with awareness of cycles is to create sustainably, to imitate the sky rather than defy it. What many don't see is that even artificial light longs to echo celestial law. In psychology and neuroscience, The crescent reappears as metaphor for consciousness itself. Brainwave patterns rise and fall in rhythms strikingly lunar. Sleep cycles wax and wane like miniature months. The subconscious reflects and refracts light from awareness, just as the moon reflects sunlight. Every insight has its shadow, every dream its returning dawn. The modern mind, illuminated by science yet hungry for meaning, rediscovers the crescent as symbol of balance between intellect and intuition. You must understand, the brain itself is a night sky. Its synapses flicker like stars, its moods turn like phases. The crescent is its signature, its ongoing becoming. In culture, the crescent adorns more than flags. It shapes brands, movements, and art. Fashion houses trace its curve into logos. Space agencies and corporations adopt it to signify continuity and innovation. The moon's arc, once divine, now markets dreams and design. Yet beneath commerce lies the same archetype, the promise of growth, of light, returning after obscurity. Humanity cannot escape the geometry of its imagination. Whether on a flag or a phone, the crescent speaks the same language. It tells us that beginnings never die, they renew. Even capitalism, in its endless cycle of rise and fall, unknowingly mimics lunar rhythm. Artists of the 21st century continue to find the moon's curve irresistible. Painters use its sliver to suggest vulnerability. Photographers capture it as the punctuation of silence. Musicians title albums and movements after it. Crescendo, crescent, creation. The moon's light, filtered through technology, has become universal metaphor once again. In films and digital landscapes, the crescent hovers as symbol of change, hope, and return. Its power lies in what it leaves unseen. Its beauty is born of restraint. The crescent's message to modern art is simple, yet profound. The incomplete invites imagination. Even in the language of space exploration, the crescent endures. Astronomers now use the term lunar crescent to describe planetary phases beyond our moon. Venus, Jupiter, even exoplanets. The pattern that once defined human calendars now defines cosmic ones. The same curve that guided harvests now measures galaxies. The symbol has transcended scale. It has become the universal unit of becoming. You must understand, in science, philosophy, or spirituality, the crescent endures because it encodes balance, the most essential principle of existence. Whether atom or star, system or soul, all follow its arc, appear, illuminate, dissolve, return. And so, in the hum of computers and the glow of satellites, the crescent still reigns. Its ancient rhythm pulses beneath our data streams, our sleep cycles, our art and ambition. It teaches that progress is not escape from nature, but deeper participation in it. The future, if it is to endure, must curve like the moon, advancing without severing, illuminating without blinding. The crescent moon stands now not above empires, but within every screen, every human gesture that seeks to balance creation with compassion. In the next part, we will turn inward once more, into the spiritual and metaphysical heart of the crescent, where its shape becomes revelation, the bridge between soul and eternity. What if the crescent moon was not simply a sign of the heavens, but the very reflection of the soul's architecture? What if its rhythm, waxing, waning, returning, was the hidden pattern of consciousness itself? You must understand, every faith, every philosophy, every dream that endures has built itself upon recurrence. The crescent is not ornament, it is ontology. Its curve is the bridge between seen and unseen, matter and meaning, the finite and the infinite. To contemplate it is to face the design of existence, that all light must pass through shadow, and all spirit must bend before rising. In mysticism, the crescent stands as the threshold of revelation. It is the veil between worlds, the boundary that both separates and connects. Sufi poets called it the brow of God, the smile of divine mercy glimmering through the night of being. For them, the waxing moon symbolized remembrance, the soul recollecting its origin in light. The waning moon, conversely, symbolized surrender, the return to unity through dissolution. The true seeker, they said, must live like the crescent, empty enough to receive, curved enough to reflect. You must understand, enlightenment is not possession of light, but the art of becoming its mirror. In Christian mysticism, the crescent has long been the emblem of grace. The Virgin's feet, resting upon the moon, depict the triumph of spirit over change, the sanctification of impermanence. For the contemplative, this image carries a profound message. Holiness does not banish time, it redeems it. The crescent, in its perpetual motion, is a symbol of sanctified becoming, of transformation, held within divine order. Even in its thinnest sliver, it declares light never truly departs, it only hides within form. The moon's return each month is the soul's reminder that salvation is cyclical, not static, an endless renewal through love's gravity. In Hindu philosophy, the crescent crowns Shiva, Lord of transformation. It is the symbol of Chandra, the ever-changing mind that he wears to remind creation that constancy lies only in consciousness. The crescent above his matted hair represents time tamed, the mind's fluctuations brought into stillness through awareness. It glows with serenity amidst chaos, suggesting that even within destruction there is rhythm. Shiva's dance beneath that sliver of light unites the cosmic opposites, creation and dissolution, sound and silence. What many don't see is that the crescent upon his head is not decoration. It is the map of liberation. In the East, Taoist sages saw in the crescent the visible expression of the Tao, the eternal way that flows between extremes. To them, the moon's phases revealed the secret of effortless balance, wu-wei, action without struggle. The crescent was the shape of surrender perfected, proof that receptivity can be strength. When light retreats, it does not die, it rests. When it returns, it does not boast, it reflects. In this quiet geometry lies the essence of spiritual wisdom. The moon teaches that transcendence is not escape from duality, but dance within it, shadow and shine in eternal correspondence. The Kabbalists of Jewish mysticism, too, saw the crescent as the vessel of divine reflection. In their cosmology, the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God, is the moon, reflecting the infinite light of Ein Sof. The crescent's waxing signifies divine union, its waning the exile of the sacred within matter. To meditate upon its light was to participate in cosmic repair, to restore balance between heaven and earth. You must understand. For them, the crescent was not astronomy. It was theology in motion. It symbolized the heart of existence itself, a rhythm of separation and return that sustains creation. In modern spiritual philosophy, the crescent has evolved into a universal metaphor for consciousness awakening. It represents partial awareness, human perception, expanding toward wholeness, yet never containing it entirely. Mystics and psychologists alike describe enlightenment as the moment one realizes that the light one seeks has always been one's own reflection. The crescent symbolizes this dawning self-recognition, the first glimmer of infinite awareness through finite perception. Its lesson is humility. No mind can hold total light. Wisdom is to reflect what one can, faithfully and without pride. Esoterically, The crescent also carries the principle of polarity, receptivity and radiance, birth and decay, silence and sound. Alchemists called it the lunar vessel, within which the solar essence of spirit is refined. In the marriage of sun and moon, the albedo and rubedo, lies the transformation of the soul from ignorance to illumination. The crescent, then, is not passive, it is crucible. It contains the tension of opposites and distills them into wisdom. What many don't see is that the curve of the moon is the shape of every evolution, every spiral of consciousness refining itself through experience. The mystics of every age agreed on one truth. The moon's light is borrowed, but its reflection is real. So too is the soul's. Human consciousness, though derivative of the infinite, is genuine in its participation. We do not create the divine. We reveal it by how we reflect it. The crescent moon, therefore, is the portrait of humility perfected. It teaches that self-realization is not ascension above the world, but alignment within it, glowing by borrowed grace, yet illuminating the night nonetheless. You must understand, to be divine is to reflect divinity, not to possess it. In this sense, the crescent's shape holds revelation. It is a doorway curved in light, inviting passage between body and spirit, intellect and intuition, mortal and eternal. Its geometry is compassion itself, open, receptive, never closed. The mystic gazes upon it and sees not an object, but an instruction. Bow before creation, and you will reflect it more clearly. The scientist measures it, the poet praises it, but the sage becomes it, curved, luminous, and endlessly returning. Thus, through all ages, the crescent has been the whisper of the cosmos to the human soul. It tells us that divinity is not a throne above, but a rhythm within, that the light we adore is the same light we carry. The crescent is the mirror of awakening, reminding every seeker that enlightenment is not a destination, but a perpetual rising through shadow. In the final part, we will follow that rise to its ultimate reflection, the moral, cosmic, and eternal truth that the crescent has carried across millennia, that life itself is the curved light of awareness, eternally returning to its source. What if the crescent moon has always been more than a symbol? What if it is a revelation, patiently waiting for humanity to understand it? What if that simple arc of light, floating above deserts and oceans, carries the entire philosophy of existence within its curve? You must understand, every age has read the crescent through its own fears and faiths, yet its meaning has never changed. The crescent is the shape of life's promise. That light, no matter how slender, always returns. It is the testimony of renewal, the eternal handwriting of creation across the silence of space. The cosmos speaks through pattern, and the crescent is its gentlest utterance. Galaxies swirl in arcs, rivers bend. Even the orbit of planets follows the moon's logic of rhythm and restraint. The curve is not weakness, it is harmony. In it lies the secret that straight lines belong only to human tools, not to divine design. The universe bends, flows, returns. To live in tune with that bend is to live wisely. To resist it is to fracture. The crescent's form thus becomes a moral geometry, teaching that balance is not achieved through rigidity, but through surrender to rhythm. In every heart, a moon is waxing or waning. Every life holds moments of fullness and moments of disappearance, and both are holy. The crescent teaches that loss is not failure, it is preparation. The light that retreats is gathering itself for return. To the despairing, it whispers patience. To the arrogant, it murmurs humility. What many don't see is that the moral of the crescent is not about triumph, but about timing. It reminds us that grace lives in motion, and perfection lies in the rhythm between being and becoming. Even darkness, it tells us, is part of light's discipline. Philosophically, the crescent embodies the bridge between permanence and change. It is the middle path between fullness and void, between knowing and wonder. Its curve refuses extremes. It tells us that truth, like light, is always partial, seen in arcs, never in absolutes. The wise learn to love fragments, to see wholeness in halves. The crescent is thus a call to humility in knowledge, compassion in judgment, and reverence in action. You must understand, wisdom does not shine like the full moon. It glows like the crescent, soft, selective, yet sufficient to navigate the night. Spiritually, the crescent is remembrance. It carries within its glow the echo of every civilization that watched it rise: Sumerian, Egyptian, Persian, Greek, Arab, and modern. It is the common scripture written in light, uniting languages and faiths that never met. It stands above conflict, unbroken by time or theology. In its curve, enemies have seen the same promise. Psychologically, it represents the reconciliation of opposites, the conscious and the subconscious, reason and emotion, the seen and the secret. The mind that mirrors the crescent learns to dwell in transition, to accept incompleteness without despair. It becomes luminous not by possession of truth, but by openness to it. This is the moon's last teaching, that the enlightened soul is not the one who shines alone, but the one who reflects others faithfully. The crescent, half dark and half light, lives as the image of integrity, the union of opposites into harmony. In morality, the crescent's lesson is cyclical responsibility. Just as the moon returns, so must conscience. What we do in light echoes through shadow. What we abandon in darkness returns for reckoning. The curve of the moon is the curve of consequence. Empires have risen beneath it and fallen beneath it, but the pattern persists. Those who mirror its patience endure. Those who defy its rhythm dissolve. The moral law, like lunar law, is simple. Move in measure with the cosmos, and you will find peace. Metaphysically, the crescent is eternity caught in motion. It reveals that creation is not an event, but an ongoing act of becoming. The light never stops. It circles, folds, renews. Life and death are not opposites, but alternating reflections of the same divine rhythm. To see this is to awaken, to realize that everything, from a thought to a galaxy, moves within the same curved breath of infinity. The crescent is the universe's quiet confession that it too is learning to see itself through us. And when the night is still and the crescent hangs thin against the void, it reminds every witness that awareness itself is the final light. The moon's glow is not distant. It is the echo of perception, the world illuminated by consciousness. In that realization, mystic and scientist, believer and skeptic, poet and philosopher meet beneath one sky. The crescent becomes the signature of unity, the curve connecting all who seek truth in different languages of light. So the story ends where it began, with eyes lifted toward the sky. The crescent moon, ancient yet new, speaks again its timeless command: to observe, to balance, to return. It tells us that faith is rhythm, wisdom is reflection, and eternity is participation. The arc of its light bends through all creation, whispering the same truth to every soul, that the divine is not distant, but mirrored in every curve of becoming. The crescent does not conclude. It continues, forever waxing, forever waning, forever reminding us that in the geometry of existence, all endings are beginnings in disguise.